David Wilcock, November 25, 2015. Disclosure. Showdown, the war for the truth. The downing of a Russian airliner, the heart attack of the founder of Russia Today in D.C., the stunning UFO-like missile test over L.A., the Paris shootings and the Turkish attack on a Russian warplane may all be signs that the war for disclosure is reaching its climax. At least 6 different insider sources are telling us the alliance has reached a huge decision. They have finally agreed to move forward with disclosure. Disclosure involves a tremendous release of classified information that will utterly change everything we thought we knew about the world today. This may include some sort of official announcement, in the not-too-distant future, that non-terrestrial intelligent civilizations are visiting Earth. A short-term initiative is already being implemented now, while the longer-term initiatives of how much to tell us, and when, are still being negotiated. All 5 of these highly unusual and violent events occurred after the majority of our insiders leaked this new intel to us, independently of each other. The old world order does not want this to happen. Only the old world order cabal group is now opposed to disclosure. And, as usual, they are using terrorism to try to stop it, against Russia and France. These attacks may be intended to bully alliance countries and create fear, so they will hopefully rethink their decision to release the big secret. Regardless of the secret and deadly war now being fought, the weeks and months ahead could finally produce some very exciting changes. So many things are happening all at once that we feel it is important to summarize what we know in one single investigation. Please note, you may post excerpts of this article on your website or social media, but please link your readers back to this original as updates may occur. Click here to read terrifying global events from 8/24 for critical setup and context. Our hearts go out to the victims of these tragedies. Like everyone else, we were shocked and saddened by the downing of the Russian airliner and the Paris shootings. And what in the world is Turkey, a U.S. ally, doing shooting down a Russian warplane that is bombing ISIS, everyone's terrorist archenemy? Up until this all started, things had been quiet for a couple months, in the sense that negative mass incidents were not dominating our collective attention. When we wrote terrifying global events in late August, the endgame seemed to be approaching very rapidly. We had 2 more large sections of data ready to go, but held them back once it was clear that the critical time had not yet arrived. It was also admittedly necessary to take some time out, breathe and rebuild our resolve to continue fighting this battle. Given what we are now seeing in the news and hearing from insiders, the time of change we were anticipating is happening now. 11:25, Russia bombards Syrian rebels near downed Russian jet. The incident was one of the most serious publicly acknowledged clashes for half a century between Russia and a NATO member country. Insider data is part of the story. If you are new to this and find yourself saying "what insiders," or something less polite, our contact with multiple whistleblowers is easily provable, with video. I, David, attended the Disclosure Project in 2001, featuring 39 insiders. I appear in the series feature film that refers to these proceedings as well. An article providing details about Sirius was prominently featured on the most viewed sidebar of the Huffington Post for well over a week. I worked closely with Project Camelot, a group that has released videos of many whistleblowers, for their first 4 years, and met many of their insiders. You can see me in part 2 of the Pete Peterson Camelot video. Pete has been a very reliable and trusted source ever since we did this taping 6 years ago. I also got called up on stage with NASA astronaut Dr. Brian O'Leary and Space Program insider Henry Deacon halfway through this video taken in Zurich. Now there is an entire show on the Gaia Network where I am interviewing the Space Program insider Corey Good, entitled Cosmic Disclosure. Cosmic Disclosure has broken all previous viewership records for Gaia, formerly GAIA-TV, and now has an audience comparable in size to that of CNN. We have leaked insider data for many years in David's blog, creating controversial articles averaging over 100,000 unique views each. Wherever possible, we have done the hard work of finding provable data to match up with insider testimony, so you don't have to take our word for it. Although the progress has been painfully slow, The disclosure war we have been documenting here has become ever increasingly obvious. There are countless news stories emerging every week that reveal the secret war that is raging behind the scenes, on a global level. The truth truly is stranger and more fascinating than fiction, and you become part of the solution by learning about it. This investigation will be a long read, but it will definitely not be boring. It presents a compelling narrative of data we have never before summarized. So drop whatever you are doing, strap in and prepare for a wild ride. They need a bigger bang to get the same result: images and videos of smoldering debris, dead bodies, gunshots, screaming victims and wounded people haunt our dreams after events like these. It is all too easy to throw up our hands and feel like all we can do is either grieve their losses or just numb ourselves out and ignore the pain. These events must get bigger and nastier over time in order to generate mass effects, such as fear and terror, which is what the perpetrators want. That's why this type of crime is called terrorism. If the perpetrators can trigger a full-scale war out of it, or at least a piecemeal World War III, as one of the links below says, then they get what they want. If we ignore the truth, we turn our backs on future victims. Top media headlines have a short attention span and only focus on one major event at a time. A new war or mass fatality serves as an excellent distraction. These disasters are shocking reminders that we have not yet reached our goals of a peaceful, harmonious future. By exposing the truth of what is going on, we can work towards a solution that will free the earth from terrorism once and for all. We cannot stand by, do nothing and wait for the next catastrophe as innocent people continue to die at the hands of these criminals. It's easy enough to go back to sleep after events like this, only to be triggered into fear once again when the next big news story comes along. Whether we realize it or not, by learning and sharing the truth, we are helping an alliance that is diligently working to defeat the perpetrators of these attacks. We will share detailed new information about this huge international alliance in this report, matching up insider data with provable facts. The game is so deadly, and the villains so ruthless, that almost every alliance move needs to be wrapped in a cloak of secrecy. WHO are the terrorists. Once you become awakened to the truth of what is going on in our world, you will never see mass terror events like these in the same way. Although there are genuine Muslim extremists working in a group like ISIS, the bigger question is who is financing them, and for what purpose. There is a great abundance of evidence to suggest that groups like ISIS are proxy armies used by the powers that were to achieve their political goals. Secret government syndicates. Who are the powers that were? You can call them whatever you like. They are the secret government syndicates that have been dominating the Western world behind the scenes. It is shocking to discover that they covertly owned and controlled both sides of every major war in the 20th century, as we revealed in Financial Tyranny. This is not an internet conspiracy theory. The data is voluminous and irrefutable. Hitler was merely the most villainous face of the Hydra. Witness testimony is admitted as proof in a court of law, and countless witnesses have already stepped forward and presented damning evidence. These crime syndicates have taught us to attack, ridicule and smear the whistleblowers and journalists exposing the truth. This becomes an emotional coping mechanism, particularly for the older generations who grew up in a world of sanitized corporate media. It helps us avoid the shocking betrayal of finding the man in the bedroom with the one we have supported and loved, and in this case voted for. Every insider we have spoken with has direct, first-person knowledge of the fact that these secret government syndicates exist. We have documented numerous examples of intel that was later proven to be correct, and to appear as major headlines. These syndicates have marshaled incredible resources to ridicule and bury the truth, all in the hopes of swaying your opinion. There is a much greater story going on. Many of the biggest headlines we see have a much greater story going on behind them than we realize. According to multiple insiders, the real story may soon be revealed to the public in a stunning, major way. It will quickly create the greatest mass awakening in all of our recorded history. The syndicates are holding back technology that includes free energy, anti-gravity, portal travel and materializers, and tools that could heal the Earth. We have also been kept in the dark about the widespread presence of intelligent civilizations in and around Earth, going back hundreds of millions of years. We are encouraged enough by what we are now hearing to put it all out there in this investigation. Honestly, I am more excited by the latest news than I have been at any other point in this journey. I can't wait to see how this all plays out. Once the dam breaks, and it obviously must, sooner or later, it will finally vindicate so many years of tireless effort in the face of lethal threats and intimidation. Is ISIS actually financed and controlled by the West? For the uninitiated, the idea that ISIS is a Western operation, financed by too big to fail banks, is so treasonous and crazy as to be impossible to consider. Nonetheless, let's now review and expand upon the first group of links we shared in August 24th's terrifying global events. After the Russian airliner explosion and the Paris mass shootings, the question of who and what is ISIS has much greater urgency. Our first link from the NY Times revealed that the governments of Iraq and Iran, at the highest levels, consider it a fact that ISIS is a proxy army of the West. Part of what makes this announcement so significant is the simple fact that an institution like the NY Times would have mentioned it at all. They are seeding a new thought into the mass public, using the plausible deniability of it only being a conspiracy theory within the governments of Iraq and Iran. What kind of intel does Iraq and Iran possess that leads them to believe ISIS is a creature of the West? September 21, 2014, NY Times. Are ISIS and CIA united? Baghdad, the United States has conducted an escalating campaign of deadly airstrikes against the extremists of the Islamic State for more than a month. But that appears to have done little to tamp down the conspiracy theories still circulating from the streets of Baghdad to the highest levels of Iraqi government that the CIA is secretly behind the same extremists that it is now attacking. We know about who made Daesh, said Ba'a al-Iraji, a deputy prime minister, using an Arabic shorthand for the Islamic State on Saturday at a demonstration called by the Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr to warn against the possible deployment of American ground troops. Mr. Sadr publicly blamed the CIA for creating the Islamic State in a speech last week. Interviews suggested that most of the few thousand people at the demonstration, including dozens of members of parliament, subscribed to the same theory. Mr. Sadr is considered close to Iran, and the theory is popular there as well. Omar al-Jabri, 31, a Sunni Muslim from a predominantly Shiite neighborhood of Baghdad who attended the rally, said, "It is obvious to everyone that the Islamic State is a creation of the United States and Israel." Whistleblower Everett Stern exposes ISIS as being funded by HSBC and JP Morgan. In this 2-minute video clip, taken from the second link in Terrifying Global Events, we meet the vastly underreported HSBC whistleblower Everett Stern. As an insider now coming forward, Stern confidently shares one of a variety of examples proving that mega banks like HSBC and JP Morgan are financing ISIS. 924, terrorism financed by HSBC and JP Morgan disappeared after August 24 article publication. Stern's website goes into much more detail. One of the most provocative pieces on Stern's site is a letter he submitted to the Federal Reserve, revealing the scope of crimes he witnessed as an employee of HSBC. This letter is extremely rich in detail. Due to the size of our investigation, we will only include enough of it to get you started, including one specific example, Everett Stern Intelligence Report, Letter to Federal Reserve on HSBC Bank. As the HSBC whistleblower, I observed blatant and systematic violations of U.S. anti-money laundering laws and a 2010 cease and desist order, violations that I believe continue to this day. While HSBC attempted to make it appear that it was in compliance with U.S. anti-money laundering laws and the 2010 cease and desist order, it was, in fact, engaged in a widespread scheme to evade those restrictions and approve massive amounts of illegal financial transactions to boost bank profits. The illegal conduct resulted in HSBC's blatant participation in, and enabling of, drug trafficking, terrorist activities and the channeling of money to sanctioned regimes abroad. Stern reported his findings to his superiors at HSBC and was at various times ignored, taunted, ridiculed and ultimately forced out. Stern also reported this information to the CIA and the FBI. Although HSBC entered into 5 settlement agreements with 5 different U.S. government agencies on December 11, 2012, pursuant to which HSBC agreed to pay $1.92 billion in fines and penalties, those settlement agreements do not release the specific illegal conduct Stern complains of and reports herein, and pertain generally to conduct that occurred prior to Stern's employment with HSBC. In June of 2011, as the specialist on the Middle East, Stern discovered that a number of the former HSBC debt collectors who were appointed AML compliance officers were approving transactions going to foundations in the Gaza Strip. Stern reported this to his superiors, and warned that Hamas, which the U.S. State Department has deemed a terrorist organization, is the elected government of Gaza and that this money could be used to fund terrorism. He did so by sending an email titled Compliance Error to Jeff Kraft and Luis Viteri, attached as Exhibit 4. Subsequently, Jeff Kraft pulled Stern into a conference room and threatened to fire him. Kraft stated, "Do you know what would happen if the government found out about the compliance error email? They would shut us down. Do you understand we are under a cease and desist order and you are putting in writing that we have a compliance error? Gary Peterson would fire you in 2 seconds if he found out about this." When Stern tried to explain the situation to Kraft, Kraft stated, "Hamas is not a terrorist organization, they were elected to power." Bloomberg covers $1.92 billion fine. In case anyone says Stern is blowing smoke and making things up, here is a Bloomberg article on the $1.92 billion fine HSBC was slapped with. And get this, HSBC admitted to financing organizations in Iran, Libya, Sudan, Burma, Cuba and Mexico as part of their settlement. This completely violated the Trading with the Enemy Act, and provided money to terrorist groups that are supposed to be blocked by economic sanctions. The $1.9 billion fine is but a tiny fraction of the $670 billion in unmonitored wire transfers and $9.4 billion in money laundering out of Mexico that was found in this investigation. July 3, 2013, HSBC judge approves $1.9 billion drug money laundering accord. HSBC Holdings plc's $1.9 billion agreement with the U.S. to resolve charges it enabled Latin American drug cartels to launder billions of dollars was approved by a federal judge. U.S. District Judge John Gleeson in Brooklyn, New York, signed off yesterday on a deferred prosecution agreement, a critical component of the London-based bank's settlement. Gleeson said in his order that he was exercising supervisory power over the deal even though the bank and government contended he didn't have authority to approve or deny it. HSBC was accused of failing to monitor more than $670 billion in wire transfers and more than $9.4 billion in purchases of U.S. currency from HSBC Mexico, allowing for money laundering, prosecutors said. The bank also violated U.S. economic sanctions against Iran, Libya, Sudan, Burma and Cuba, according to a criminal information filed in the case. Civil penalties. The bank, Europe's largest, agreed to pay a $1.25 billion forfeiture and $665 million in civil penalties under the settlement, prosecutors announced in December. At a hearing the same month, Gleeson told prosecutors there had been publicized criticism of the agreement, which lets the bank and management avoid further criminal proceedings over the charges. Gleeson said he will continue supervising implementation of the deal, under which the bank agreed not to contest criminal charges of failing to maintain an effective anti-money laundering program, failing to conduct due diligence, and violating the Trading with the Enemy Act and the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Newsmax goes into the blunt details. Obviously, publicized criticism is a pretty loose term. There is so much information online these days that a story like this can easily be buried, and it was. Here is what the whistleblower Everett Stern had to say about this $1.9 billion judgment HSBC paid out in an interview with Newsmax, July 30, 2014, HSBC whistleblower, banks are financing terrorism. HSBC bank whistleblower Everett Stern, CEO of Tactical Rabbit, says that banks like HSBC not only know, but have admitted to doing business with companies that finance terrorists. HSBC is part of the Deferred Prosecution Agreement in JP Morgan and Citibank. They have all admitted to these things, Stern told Ed Berliner on Midpoint on Newsmax TV Wednesday. For some reason the mainstream media is not covering the issue, and the American public doesn't understand that these banks are literally financing the next 9/11, he explained. Stern uncovered a money laundering operation at HSBC in 2011, when he discovered that the bank was giving the terrorist group Hezbollah access to millions of dollars. What I found was criminal manipulation of the wire filter. There was hundreds upon millions of dollars moving from Carib's supermarkets, which is in Gambia, which is owned by the Tajideen brothers, which are financiers of Hezbollah, he explained. And that money was being laundered through the U.S. and then back to Lebanon, he said. It was financing Hezbollah, and this is what was going on at HSBC, the CEO of Tactical Rabbit said. The Justice Department fined HSBC $2 billion, which is 5 weeks of their profit, and that was it, he added. Even though money laundering is generally seen as a white-collar crime, these people have the blood of American soldiers on their hands. The Huffington Post covered a more recent example. HSBC supposedly said we'll never, ever do it again after paying the 5-week fine, but this was not the case. 1 year later, HSBC was again fined for blatantly financing terrorism. This was directly due to Everett Stern's brave efforts to share the truth. The story even made it to the Huffington Post, proving this is not an internet conspiracy theory. Judge John Gleeson obviously was unable to successfully monitor HSBC after his 1.9b judgment against them was filed and they paid the settlement. Everett Stern is an example of someone who did the right thing. He discovered HSBC was transferring hundreds of millions of dollars of funds to a variety of terrorist organizations, and he reported it. Notice how HSBC attempts to take credit for this, saying this data was voluntarily reported, when in fact it was only thanks to Stern, a Snowden-type whistleblower, that it was released. December 18, 2013, HSBC gets small fine for terrorist transactions. A major U.S. bank has agreed to a settlement for transferring funds on the behalf of financiers for the militant group Hezbollah, the Treasury Department announced on Tuesday. Concluding that HSBC's actions were not the result of willful or reckless conduct, Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control accepted a $32,400 settlement from the bank. Treasury noted, as did HSBC in a statement to HuffPost, that the violations were voluntarily reported. Everett Stern, a former HSBC compliance officer who complained to his supervisors about the Hezbollah-linked transactions, told HuffPost he was ecstatic and depressed at the same time. "Those are my transactions, I reported them," he said, satisfied that the government was taking action. "But," he added, "where I am upset was those were a handful of transactions, and I saw hundreds of millions of dollars being transferred." Stern said he hopes the government's enforcement actions against HSBC have not come to an end with the latest settlement. They admit to financing terrorism and they get fined $32,000. "Where if I were to do that, I would go to jail for life," he said. HSBC's fine is less than the $40,165.07 covered in the settlement agreement that the bank transferred between December 2010 and April 2011 on behalf of a development company that Treasury says serves as a front for some of Hezbollah's biggest financiers in Africa. And the government watchdogs claim that HSBC committed no substantially similar apparent violations in the past 5 years is likely to raise some eyebrows. In December 2012, the bank agreed to pay a $1.9 billion settlement for moving money that a 2012 Senate report found had likely helped drug cartels, and a Saudi Arabian bank the CIA has linked to Al-Qaeda. A huge number of suspicious banker deaths. What you just read is only what one whistleblower was able to uncover, within one of a variety of too-big-to-fail banks and financial institutions. There have been a huge number of violent deaths in the banking and finance industry over the last 3 years, overlapping with the post-Snowden era. Given how suspicious most of these suicides are, This could be a mass terror operation against any potential whistleblowers by the banks themselves. A list of 75 different suspicious banker deaths in the recent past was published at the Secrets of the Fed site. At least 36 occurred just in 2014 alone. Internet searches reveal these lists have been widely circulated on a variety of conspiracy analysis sites. Every single link in the Secrets of the Fed list pointed to a blog by Michael Tyler, which features conspiracy information as well as racist content, unfortunately. An example of content disparaging to Asians would be November 2, 2015's funny Chinglish signs. If Michael Tyler is indeed a real guy, it is definitely not a good idea to mix racist content together with such a serious investigation on the same site. This is one of the tactics the cabal uses to discredit information. Either way, this site has the largest single list of provable banker suicides we have found online. Here is Tyler's latest list of 66 banker suicides, from 2013 to June 2015. Unlike the Secrets of the Fed list, these links point to actual sites other than Tyler's. Staged suicides are a common tactic of the cabal. In order to understand the secrets behind the list you are about to read, some additional information is necessary. It is considered common knowledge among the insiders I have spoken to that the cabal assassinates whistleblowers by setting them up to look like a suicide. These jobs typically involve a 5-man team of paid mercenaries, called wet workers. The total cost for a job like this is typically $5 million. It may be that the ringleader, who does the dirtiest work, gets $2M and the other 4, who provide a lookout and support, get $750K. Traditionally the money is paid in cash, so as not to create any traceable transactions that could be discovered later on in an investigation. A good wet worker has psychopathic personality characteristics that allow them to feel no fear or stress as they carry out these jobs. They are invariably shown information convincing them that their target is a horrible person, and they are doing everyone a favor by taking them out. Many of these workers end up being killed at some point to ensure silence. The Bourne Identity films are extremely accurate in this regard, and others. The methods will vary. In some cases, like a car running off the road, the target never sees their assassins. In other cases the killers simply walk right up to their target. What they do at this point is much more sophisticated than the old gun in the pizza trick. Once these 3 guys show up, the other 2 are outlooks. It very quickly becomes clear to the target that he or she has no choice. The target will often be spoken to in a very calm, relaxed manner, even with a seemingly sincere apology as they are given a chance to accept their fate. The target may be told that if they do not write their own suicide note, everyone they know and love will be brutally tortured and killed. In many cases they are given a non-traceable sedative that knocks them out first, so they are not conscious of whatever is then done to them. This also keeps the noise level down if the job is set up in an outdoor area or in a crowded residential facility like an apartment building. The workers are also trained to be creative and use different methods, so their jobs do not take on a signature as we would see with serial killers. Furthermore, all cars since 2006 can be hacked and driven by remote control, thanks to a secret law, making it even easier to take someone out. A chronological list of the 44 suspicious banker deaths in 2014 alone. In order to honor the dead, we have gone through and identified high-quality links to stories about each of their losses, and put them in chronological order. Other lists of suspicious banker deaths included names that were not on Tyler's site, and those names have also been included here. Although there were 17 suspicious deaths on Tyler's list for 2013, the biggest surge of events started in December 2013, after Snowden had changed the world. We will start in December 2013 and continue to the end of 2014, though there have been many more suspicious deaths both before and after this 1 year. Some of these are undoubtedly real suicides or accidents and not staged murders, but the sheer volume of unusual incidents in 1 year is cause for concern. December 2013, December 7, 2013, Joseph Ambrosio, 34, J.P. Morgan financial analyst, died suddenly from acute respiratory syndrome. December 14, 2013, Benjamin Idem, 25, Nigerian, Diamond Bank executive, died in car crash with N2 million cash, only an $800K recovered. December 15, 2013. Jason Allen Salas, 34, information technology specialist at J.P. Morgan, found dead outside a Walgreens pharmacy. December 23, 2013. Susan Hewitt, 49, former Deutsche Bank executive, found face down in stream near her house during flood. December 23, 2013. Robert Wilson, 87, hedge fund founder, philanthropist, net worth $800 in 2000, jumped from 16th floor, ruled suicide. January 2014. January 11, 2014. David Bird, 55, longtime reporter for The Wall Street Journal working at the Dow Jones newsroom, found in River 14 Mo later, 1/19/2814. Tim Dickinson, Director of Communications for Swiss Re, ties to J.P. Morgan, company covered up time and cause of death. January 26, 2014. William Bilberich-Schmidt, 58, former senior risk manager at Deutsche Bank, hung/possible suicide. January 28, 2014. Gabriel McGee, 39, J.P. Morgan employee, dead after allegedly jumping from the rooftop of J.P. Morgan HQ in Europe. January 31, 2014. Mike Zucker, 50, chief economist at Russell Investments and a former Federal Reserve Bank economist, suicide. February 2014. February 3, 2014. Ryan Henry Crane, 37, executive at J.P. Morgan, sudden death, cause unknown. February 4, 2014. John Ruiz, Morgan Stanley municipal debt analyst, died suddenly, no cause given. February 7, 2014. Richard Talley, former Chicago banker, founder and CEO of American Title Services, shot himself 7-8 times with nail gun. February 18, 2014. Lee Junji, J.P. Morgan, alleged suicide after jumping from the J.P. Morgan HQ in Hong Kong. February 19, 2014. James Stewart Jr., former National Bank of Commerce CEO, found dead. February 28, 2014. Autumn Radke, formerly J.P. Morgan, CEO of a Bitcoin exchange firm, competing with the Fed, suspected suicide. March 2014. March 11, 2014. Mohammed Hamwi, 48, Syrian, system analyst at DREP, a financial data and analytics firm, shot. March 12, 2014. Edmund Riley, 47, trader at Midtown's Vertical Group, jumped in front of a speeding Long Island Railroad commuter train. March 12, 2014. Kenneth Bellendo, 28, former J.P. Morgan, involved in London whale scandal, family of bankers, alleged suicide jump. March 24, 2014. Joseph Jumpapa, J.P. Morgan lawyer, cyclist hit by minivan. March 24, 2014. London coroners opened formal investigation into rash of banker suicide deaths. April 2014. April 3, 2014. Amir Kess, 52, Israeli co-founder and managing director Markstone Capital Group Equity Fund, cyclist hit by car. April 4, 2014. Jan-Peter Schmidtman, former CEO of Dutch bank ABN AMRO, shot dead along with wife and daughter in family tragedy. April 7, 2014. Jürgen Frick, 48, Bank Frick & Company, AG, shot dead in underground parking garage of bank, shooter committed suicide. April 13, 2014. Tanji Dewberry, Assistant VP, Credit Suisse, died with son and house fire, arson ruled out. April 18, 2014. Benoit Philippines, Director, Manager BNP Paribas, gunned down with wife and nephew in front of home. April 22, 2014. Lydia, no surname given, 52, France's bred Banque Populaire, questioned her superiors before suicide jump. April 23, 2014. Li Jianhua, 49, Non-Bank Financial Institutions Supervision Department of the Regulator, heart attack. April 28, 2014. Andrew Jorzik, 27, Assistant VP, Commercial banking at PNC Financial Services Group, body found in river, mystery. May 2014. May 6, 2014, Correlos 6, 61, Belgian Director General of Taxation, managed 9,140 employees, great reformer, drowned. May 7, 2014, Thomas Inkman, 42, Managing Director of Global Infrastructure, J.P. Morgan NY, sudden death, cause unknown, pending. May 9, 2014, Nazim Mubin, Assistant VP of ZBTL Bank, Islamabad, Pakistan, possible suicide jump from 10th floor of bank building. May 23, 2014, Nigel Charvine, 37, Senior Relationship Manager Ulster Bank, nephew of Scottish politician, accidental drowning. May 24, 2014, Daniel Leaf, 55, FMR Deutsche Bank, Senior Manager at the Bank of Scotland, Saracen Fund Managers, Fellow FFO 1000 FT Cliff. May 24, 2014, Mahafari Demir Khosravi, 45, Iranian billionaire hanged for his part in 2.6b financial scandal. May 31, 2014, Louis Katz, 76, 4 days after buying The Inquirer, Philadelphia Daily News and Philly.com, dies of suspicious plane crash. June 2014. June 3, 2014, Jan Winkelhuijsen, 75, Dutch financial commissioner, found stabbed along with wife in alleged suicide pact at home. June 13, 2014, Richard Rockefeller, 66, son of megabillionaire David Rockefeller, died on Friday the 13th in suspicious plane crash. June 24, 2014, Richard Gravino, 49, application team lead, J.P. Morgan, sudden death, cause unknown, pending. July 2014. July 7, 2014, Julian Knott, 45, J.P. Morgan Executive Director, Global Tier 3 Network Ops, allegedly shot wife multiple times, then shot himself dead. July 17, 2014, Thierry Brouwer, 50, Managing Director of Energy Finance Unit of ING, largest Dutch lender, died in MH17 plane crash. July 20, 2014, Nicholas Voltz, 39, Managing Director of Cross Asset Sales at Goldman Sachs, New York, drowned while kitesurfing. August 2014. August 31, 2014, Todd Robert Edward, 51, Group Vice President for M&T Bank, died of vehicular manslaughter by DUI driver. September 2014. September 14, 2014, James McDonald, 56, President and CEO of Rockefeller & Co., Chairman of NYSE Audit Committee, self-inflicted gunshot wound. October 2014. October 20, 2014, Calogero Gambino, 41, Managing Director and Senior Attorney at Deutsche Bank, part of Lieber scandal, found hanged in apartment. October 23, 2014, Thierry Lean, 49, French/Israeli co-founder of investment firm with former IMF director, embroiled in trade scandal, suicide. November 2014. November 5, 2014, Geert Tak, 52, Belgian, private banker for ING, manager for Wealthy, left home without cell phone or laptop, body found in water. November 16, 2014, Sean Miller, 42, Citigroup Managing Director, Key in Sustainable Finance, /Trist and Neck, murder weapon is missing. November 20, 2014, Melissa Millen, 54, Senior Vice President Mass Mutual, held Wall Street trade secrets, stabbed in chest, homicide. November 24, 2014, Thu Lehman, 64, Dutch, manager at ABN/AMRO, found with wife in submerged vehicle ruled as suicide, creating fear. Sharing this data is admittedly problematic. Insiders have repeatedly said the cabal likes it when people hear about these things, as it creates useful fear. What do they mean by useful fear? It has nothing to do with learning to keep the door closed if you get an unexpected pizza delivery. Big Brother is a confidence game. They have nowhere near enough staff to stop the awakening. They want you to be afraid of them. That way you never choose to speak out, or do anything to stop them, because you worry that you might be next. Let's be clear on this. The Big Brother we were warned about in 1984 is ultimately a confidence game. Although we now know that surveillance is a worldwide, inescapable fact, there are only a limited number of employees working in the system. The level of discontent is very widespread in the post-Snowden era. Each person is a complex individual, not a drone, and they have mixed feelings about what they are doing, to say the least. There are hundreds of millions of people learning about the cabal's deepest secrets online. The danger in educating yourself at this point is almost non-existent. Countless numbers of people are writing and making videos about these secrets, and they continue along for years without any interference. Certain whistleblowers are taken out in order to prevent the spread of the truth, but these are extremely rare cases. IT's too expensive. Another point to remember is staged murders are expensive. Eliminating a mere 100 people professionally costs $500 million. That adds up quickly. The cases you just read about were probably considered severe enough to justify the expense, even with the cabal's financial resources continually dwindling. Critics might say, what do you mean? They can just print money out of thin air and spend whatever they want. Historically that was true, but it is no longer the case in the behind-the-scenes world of today, where an international uprising against the cabal is now occurring. The Federal Reserve dollar has indeed been the global reserve currency, but a huge movement is now underway to change that, as we will discuss. The 2008 bailouts were a desperation move on an unprecedented scale. The Fed wouldn't have done it if it wasn't absolutely necessary for their survival. The alliance we will be meeting in the next section has worked very hard to cut off all sources of funding to the cabal, and it has worked very well. The alliance thought they were going to succeed in 2008, and were responsible for the financial cut-off that forced the bailouts to occur in the first place. What is the motive for the megabanks to kill off whistleblowers? You will have seen whistleblower proof that megabanks are financing terrorism, as well as a huge list of suspicious banker deaths. We also leaked insider information regarding the use of 5-man teams to create a fake suicide as a means of assassinating people the banks don't like. This next excerpt from a June 2, 2015 article by Pam and Russ Martins establishes one of the motives for the megabanks to be killing off their workers. Felony-level criminal charges are hitting the banks left and right. For the first time in 2 centuries, 6 halves, Wall Street banker deaths continue. Where are the serious investigations? In any serious investigation, law enforcement is required to look at any potential motive for foul play. But when it comes to serial deaths among Wall Street bankers and technology personnel, occurring repeatedly over the last 18 months in highly unusual circumstances, the deaths are almost instantaneously labeled non-suspicious by the police. For the first time in 2 centuries, iconic Wall Street banks are being serially charged with committing felonies. These banks have known that felony charges were coming for the same 18 months that bankers have been dying under suspicious circumstances. After a series of deferred prosecution agreements, 2 weeks ago on May 20, 5 global banks pleaded guilty to criminal charges of conspiring to rig markets. 2 of those were U.S. banks, Citigroup and J.P. Morgan Chase, where recent unusual deaths have occurred. The lawsuits now in process will utterly destroy the megabanks. The megabanks are now being hit with a wide variety of epic scandals, with Libra only being one example. They are being systematically exposed. Libra and other scandals have exposed the megabanks to so many lawsuits that their full exposure and downfall is inevitable. Together, these scandals have revealed that these criminal syndicates have rigged every possible market to their advantage. This is already a commonly known fact. Lawsuits have already been filed by a huge number of local and state governments, as well as aggrieved corporations and even federal governments. Insiders have revealed that the number of lawsuits now in process against the megabanks will inevitably lead to their downfall. They are on borrowed time. However, the rash of highly suspicious banker deaths suggests that an even more outrageous secret is still being hidden. The banks take out life insurance policies on the workers they kill. As a side business, another layer of the puzzle, though certainly not the end of it, is that these banks can cash in on murdering their own employees through staged suicides. What would happen if you took out a life insurance policy on a family member who then just so happened to fall down the stairs? You would very likely be embroiled in a criminal murder investigation. Imagine now that a small business was allowed to take out a life insurance policy on one of its workers. The worker suddenly dies mysteriously. The business then takes all the insurance money, and gives nothing to the family of the deceased. Obviously, in a case like this the family would lawyer up and take on the business in a criminal investigation. If they won, the business would be liquidated. The mega banks insure their workers all the time, including the ones who then die. But no one can reach them because they have been too big to fail. When Pam and Russ Martins of Wall Street on Parade tried to conduct their own investigation on the banks doing this, they were told it was a trade secret. Cashing in on employee deaths is a trade secret. Here is an excerpt from the Martins' investigation of the stabbing death of bank executive Melissa Millen, included in the November section of our list above. December 8, 2014, slain Wall Street executive was investigating banker deaths. On Thursday, November 20, 2014, the body of 54-year-old Melissa Millen, a divorced mother of 2 school-age children, was found at approximately 8 p.m. along a jogging path. According to the coroner's report, it was determined that Millen's death was attributable to a stab wound to the chest with an edged weapon. Police ruled the death a homicide, a rarity for this town where residents feel safe enough to routinely jog by themselves on the same path used by Millen. Information has now emerged that Millen had access to highly sensitive data on bank profits resulting from the collection of life insurance proceeds from her insurance company employer on the death of bank workers. This is data that a federal regulator of banks has characterized as trade secrets. BLI is shorthand for bank-owned life insurance, a controversial practice where banks purchase bulk life insurance on the lives of their workers. The death benefit pays to the bank instead of to the family of the deceased. Banks as well as other types of corporations enjoy major tax benefits through the use of this type of insurance. The cash buildup in the policies contribute to annual earnings on a tax-free basis, while the death benefit is received free of federal income tax when the employee eventually dies. Even if the worker is no longer employed at the bank, it can still collect the death benefit. Because J.P. Morgan Chase has experienced a number of tragic deaths among young workers in their 30s this year, we asked the OCC for the number of deaths from 2008 through March 21, 2014 on which J.P. Morgan Chase collected death benefits. We also asked for any peer studies showing the same data comparing J.P. Morgan Chase with Bank of America, Wells Fargo and Citigroup. The OCC responded to our request on April 18, 2014, advising that they did have documents responsive to our request but that all documents were going to be withheld because they were privileged or contained trade secrets. While the OCC refused to provide this information, Millen was among a limited group outside of federal regulators who was in a position to have broad data on the death benefit claims being submitted by multiple banks. Having data across multiple banks could have facilitated the type of peer review studies we had requested from the OCC, trade secrets that Wall Street does not want to allow into the sunshine. Further proof that ISIS is a stage-managed, Western operation. It would be easier to sleep at night if the mystery stopped right there. Banks, fearing mega lawsuits, are killing off potential whistleblowers and cashing in on it. However, the rabbit hole goes much deeper than that. These banks are involved in the most elaborate and ruthless mass crimes in human history. It makes mainstream media seem surreal at best, but it's true. We are told that our freedom and stability is being threatened by terrorists taking down airliners and shooting masses of innocent people. Terrorists are receiving critical funding directly from the mega banks themselves. Without the banks, terrorism would be far less frequent and effective. We are told that these ragtag religious extremists are so violent, ruthless and powerful that none of us can ever be safe again. We now know that these terrorists are receiving critical funding directly from the mega banks themselves. Without the banks, there would be no terrorists. Or, at the very least, they would be much less effective at meeting their goals. Welcome to the truth. It seems crazy. It really sucks. It is much more comfortable to try to make it go away. Yet the evidence is undeniable. Everett Stern may have been one of the only whistleblowers lucky enough to survive being suicided for his work in revealing this horrifying truth. A nice stopping point on the side of the road. It's all a big misunderstanding. Remember, Everett Stern blew the whistle. The banks admitted they were financing terrorists. They quietly publicized it, paid the fine and kept on going. Some skeptics or paid disinfo agents could then say the banks didn't know where this money was going. They are a business, and their business is banking. They need to keep circulating money in order to make a profit. Yes, they sent hundreds of millions to countries like Iran, Libya, Sudan, Burma, Cuba and Mexico, but this was just for building roads, bridges and schools. It was all a big misunderstanding. Sorry, folks, we got a little too greedy. How could we have ever imagined they'd use the money to kill people? This could be a nice stopping point on the side of the road. They blame it on their own greed, say they didn't know what was happening, pay the fine, maybe fire a few mid-level people and get back in the race. Not just money, but direct physical support. The rabbit hole gets even deeper when we discover that the banks and their subsidiaries are giving these terrorists direct physical support. This includes arming them with all the weapons and supplies they need, as we will see a bit later. If this can be proven, all plausible deniability is exhausted. This is no misunderstanding. This is high treason, on an almost unimaginable level. What if we could prove that the banks are also running all the PR and marketing for these terrorists? What if we find out the banks are producing videos for them, and then promoting these videos in the media outlets they own and control? Now we've crossed the line. There is no turning back. The mega banks are creating and advertising these villains to fulfill their plans of controlling the world. This is how you get a global mega villain who has the psychological impact necessary to sway the minds of millions of people into another war. I understand that this is disturbing stuff. Nonetheless, if you learn about it now instead of all at once, when the data dumps occur, you can help others cope. The ISIS beheadings appear to be fake videos produced by the West. These next two links we posted in August 2014's terrifying global event strongly suggest that ISIS is a stage-managed, Western operation, just as the governments of Iran and Iraq consider to be common knowledge. A group like ISIS might not have the money, resources and know-how to achieve quality-level video production values on their own, but others certainly do. 924. Video evidence. Turkish TV staged ISIS beheadings. A trailer for the Kurtlar Vadisi television show reveals a nearly identical scene as what we saw in the alleged ISIS beheadings. The idea that Turkey is supporting ISIS became far more of an urgent issue right as we were going to press with this article. Turkey, a U.S. ally, shot down a Russian warplane that was attacking ISIS positions in Syria. 1124. Putin says downing of Russian jet over Syria is a stab in the back by terrorist accomplices. Turkey backstabbed Russia by downing the Russian warplane and acted as accomplices of the terrorists, Russian President Vladimir Putin said. This incident stands out against the usual fight against terrorism. Our troops are fighting heroically against terrorists, risking their lives. But the loss we suffered today came from a stab in the back delivered by accomplices of the terrorists, Putin said. Putin said the plane was hit by a Turkish warplane as it was traveling at an altitude of 6,000 meters, about a kilometer from the Turkish border. It was hit by an air-to-air missile launched by a Turkish F-16 jet. The crash site is 4 kilometers from the border. The plane posed no threat to Turkish national security, he stressed. Russia has for a long time been aware of oil going from Syria under the control of terrorists to Turkey, Putin said. The money finances terrorist groups. IS has big money, hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars, from selling oil. In addition, they are protected by the military of an entire nation. One can understand why they are acting so boldly and blatantly. Why they kill people in such atrocious ways. Why they commit terrorist acts across the world. including in the heart of Europe, the Russian leader said. The downing of the Russian warplane happened despite Russia signing an agreement with the U.S. to prevent such incidents in Syria, Putin stressed. Turkey claims to be part of the U.S.-led coalition fighting against IS in Syria, he added. Wait a minute. Without the full context we are presenting in this investigation, many people must be extremely confused by this. Isn't ISIS supposed to be a terrorist enemy of the United States? Isn't Turkey supposed to be an ally of the United States? If Russia is bombarding ISIS positions, destroying the terrorist enemy of the United States, then why in the world would Turkey try to stop them? Although it seems hard to believe, here is an idea to consider: ISIS is the proxy terrorist army of the cabal. Turkey is a powerful cabal supporter. The cabal needs ISIS to fulfill its political objectives. Any attack against ISIS is an attack against the cabal. Therefore, in desperation, a nearby cabal ally, Turkey, attacks a Russian plane bombing ISIS. This may seem quite surreal to you, but we have barely even begun to lay out all the evidence. Let's watch the InfoWars video. This time we are going to include the InfoWars video that shows how Turkish TV had a scene that looked precisely identical to the ISIS beheadings. The video goes much farther than that in exposing deep connections between ISIS and Turkey. Now, in light of the shoot-down of the Russian warplane attacking ISIS and keeping us safe from terrorism, this is a must-see. Former Prime Minister of Lebanon blows the whistle. If you watch the above video, you will learn that the former Prime Minister of Lebanon, Saad Hariri, said the U.S. ran ISIS operations in Iraq out of its embassy in Ankara, Turkey. The goal was to balkanize Iraq, and its oil treasure, into a group of nation-states that could be far more easily controlled. Hariri is no ordinary insider. As the former Prime Minister of Lebanon, you can bet that he has absolute evidence to prove his assertions. New InfoWars article exposes much deeper ties between Turkey, the U.S. and ISIS. Just as we were about to post this, we found an InfoWars article that establishes an even deeper connection between Turkey, the U.S. and ISIS. Here is just a portion of what it has to say. 11/24, NATO should investigate Turkey's support of ISIS jihadists. A highly classified report released to the Senate Intelligence Committee on the Benghazi assault in September 2012 details an agreement between Obama and Turkey's Prime Minister Erdogan to transport military supplies from Libya through Turkey and into the hands of Islamists in Syria. The arms transfer line was documented by journalist Seymour Hersh, who was dumped from The New Yorker for dispelling the myth spun by the United States on Osama bin Laden's death. According to the Telegraph, Jamal Maroof, the leader of the Syrian Revolutionary Front, a group created by the CIA, Saudi and Qatari intelligence, was instructed to transfer weapons to al-Nusra. Turkey helps jihadi fighters, including those from the Islamic State, along its border with Syria. Turkey's support was vital for the jihadists in getting in and out of the country, Orhan Kemal Cengiz, a Turkish newspaper columnist, said last year. Hillary Clinton and her Republican rivals have called for a no-fly zone in Syria. Ben Carson and Chris Christie have called for shooting down Russian aircraft if it intrudes on a no-fly zone. Both political parties finally agree on something. You don't say. You guys do realize that France just got shot up by ISIS in a 9/11 style attack, and has joined Russia in bombing whatever is left out of ISIS in Syria? This whole situation is getting more and more surreal by the day. The cabal is desperate to protect whatever is left of their proxy terrorist army. This is a very strong clue that if the cabal loses ISIS, they will have lost the ability to prevent disclosure. Let's now continue with the second link we posted in Terrifying Global Events. This may be the smoking gun to reveal that ISIS beheading videos are a cabal production. Russian hackers capture astonishing behind-the-scenes video of James Foley beheading. In this next link, we appear to be seeing the original Jihadi John beheading video of journalist James Foley from a much more revealing angle. July 11, 2015, staged ISIS beheading video leaked from McCain staffer. You must see it to believe it. Hackers of the Cyber Burkit group have released a video of the execution of prisoners of the Islamic State, the Islamist terrorist armed organization, which according to the images, was filmed in a recording studio. The hackers explained that they found the video on an electronic device belonging to a friend of U.S. Senator John McCain. We, the Cyberbricket Group, have at our disposal a file which it is difficult to underestimate the importance. Dear Senator McCain, we recommend that you not take with you secret documents in any travel abroad, especially in Ukraine. Still image from leaked Jihadi John video, showing identical moves to the James Foley video and revealing it was all staged. Jihadi John pretends to slash Foley's throat. Then they both laugh and he pats him on the back in the leaked video. The James Foley video was widely criticized by leading experts when it first came out for appearing to be faked. The video inexplicably faded to black as the slashing movement started. No blood was seen. Now we have another camera angle of this same video. Right after the alleged slashing, both guys laugh. Just like the fake Bin Laden character said in the Alliance disclosure film Iron Man 3, it's all green screen. Russia was responsible for hacking and releasing this video from one of Senator John McCain's own staff members. This is an image of the high-profile Telegraph article that accused the Foley beheading video of being a fake when it first came out. Let's watch the video. The total length of this video is 5 minutes. You do not need to sit through the whole thing to get the point. You can slide along the bottom and find the key points in the video where the beheading appears to take place, only to suddenly stop. Don't worry. Nothing bad happens. There is no blood. It's all a fake. They are actors. He does a violent slashing motion over the neck, but no one is hurt. The guys then pal around with each other as if they were good friends. Any attempt to debunk this hacked video is ridiculous. It is ridiculous to suggest that anyone would go to the time and effort necessary to set up such an elaborate fake as what we see in this leaked video. There are at least 6 staff, 6 professional studio lights, 2 high-end cameras, a gigantic green screen and a pile of dirt intended to mimic the desert. 2 of the staff members appear to be holding cue cards for Jihadi John and James Foley to read their lines. The second man from the left is holding a smaller cue card, and the second man from the right is holding up a larger one as it rests on the floor. It would probably cost at least $10,000 to cover the staff, equipment and studio rental sufficient to set this up if the hackers turned out to be creating a hoax. Professional 3-point lighting is used to ensure Foley's head cuts the shadow against his right shoulder, as if it were being created by the sun. Wide lights are mounted off to the left, to ensure the green background is lit evenly enough that the effect will be convincing by Hollywood standards. In the still image above, you can see a slight black line around Foley's shoulder and head, particularly on his right side, consistent with green screen keying. The sand and sky behind him is probably taken from a stock film that was shot with a still camera in the desert. There appears to be some pixelation in the gray area above the sand, suggesting they did not shoot it at a high enough resolution to zoom in convincingly. On a real shoot, this pixelation would not appear. Here, only the sand Foley is kneeling on is actually real. Everything else was added in post. A scrap of hair appears above his left ear, suggesting his head was only shaved just before the shoot, and was not being kept this way before then. These clues also explain Foley's complete lack of any convincing fear. He knew he was acting and that he was not about to die. It is quite astonishing that the mega-hit film Iron Man 3 predicted that we would see a fake terrorist working on a green screen, just as we see here. We had already argued that Iron Man 3 and Captain America, the Winter Soldier were both heavily influenced by the Pentagon portion of the Alliance. If the hacked video is a fake, then why not just tell the public? The setup in this hacked video has everything you would need to create videos that look precisely identical to what ISIS actually released. If this was only a fake, done by the alleged hackers themselves, then why didn't they also produce a fake video that the media identified and exposed? Here is the fake video the alleged hackers put all of this time and money into making. Here is the real beheading video. See the difference? Why would hackers spend all that time and money to create a video that hardly anyone ever saw, outside certain alternative media circles? Wouldn't these hackers also be able to prove that the video came from John McCain's staffer, if anyone bothered to subpoena them for court testimony? The almost complete silence from Western media is another sign that this video was much too close to the truth, and therefore had to be ignored. Too many people would start matching up the movements of Jihadi John's arm with those of the James Foley video, revealing the two were identical. Another link from mainstream UK press. Here is a link where the UK Daily Star covered this shocking story, revealing the entire ISIS story could be a Western con job, financed by the mega banks. The UK is one of the countries where there are both alliance members and cabal members working simultaneously in media and government. July 12, 2015, UK Daily Star covers leaked ISIS green screen beheading video footage. The Islamic State, ISIS, beheading videos reviled millions around the world as they watched Jihadi John callously murder innocent civilians in the most barbaric way in the desert. But this latest video suggests the videos may have been carried out by actors. The short clip, which has been watched more than 120,000 times, captures a man wearing the same black clothing as Jihadi John does in the official ISIS films. Another man wearing a red baseball cap, possibly a director, exchanges words with the actor and then moves back behind the cameras. Other TV crew members stand around the set as the two actors appear to stand in front of a green screen, a production technique used to include special effects and footage. The film, which lasts just over a minute, then appears to show the tall masked figure address the camera and gesture with a large knife, much in the same way Jihadi John does in the gruesome beheading videos. He then grabs the prisoner's head and moves the knife towards his neck before appearing to carry out the beheading. But he stops a split second later and moves away before playfully slapping his co-actor's head. Mega banks are definitely part of the problem, the man in the bedroom. Do you see him yet? Or is it still easier to close your eyes, plug your ears and attempt to hum it all away? Now we have established that mega banks are financing terrorism, very likely murdering whistleblowers and could be using ISIS as a proxy army. They also appear to be helping them with PR and marketing, including producing their videos by green screen in a huge indoor studio. They wouldn't dare to film these videos outdoors, because alliance satellites could then capture the scene and reveal it was all a fake, and no one died. The mega banks are far more powerful than most of us realize. This is a lot to take in, but it is still not the end of the story. At this point, we need to look even deeper. Exactly how much power do these mega banks really possess? A top Swiss Fit study, headed by Dr. James Glatfelder, determined that 80% of all the money being made in the world ultimately flows into 147 corporations. This was a major focal point of our book-length investigation Financial Tyranny. Hardly anyone is aware that the overwhelming majority of all profits in the world are being taken by such a small number of corporations. Most importantly, two-thirds of the top 50 companies in this list of 147 are the classic too-big-to-fail banks. They are all colluding together as a singular entity. As we discussed in Financial Tyranny, these banks were handed $29 trillion of bailout money in 2008, without a single public vote being cast. How is it even possible that so much power could be in the hands of so few people? The Libor scandal revealed that these banks only appear to be in competition with one another. Secretly, they are all colluding and working as if they were a single entity. Earnings and net worth are being dramatically overinflated, in the greatest Ponzi scheme in all of recorded history. This tremendous corporate mega-monopoly suggests that the problem runs much deeper than just banking and finance. If you can make it this far in your own investigations, you are still only beginning to understand what is really going on. Vertical integration. It is ultimately necessary to examine the hyper-secret group that intentionally designed and built this towering monopoly. It is no accident that too-big-to-fail banks are dominating 80% of all money-making businesses in the world. These secret syndicates have been building up to this level of global control for at least the last 300 years. Many great scholars are putting the pieces together. It appears to go all the way back to the Roman Empire, the European bloodline royals, the Khazars, the Knights Templar, the Jesuit order and secret societies. The banker suicides are only some of the most recent casualties in a countless list of victims who have been murdered in this group's quest for power. Millions of people use potentially misleading terms like Illuminati and New World Order to describe this group. We have chosen to call them the Cabal. This group has managed to infiltrate and dominate mass media, governmental elections, military and corporations through what they call vertical integration. There is a sizable learning curve required to break through centuries of media brainwashing, at least since the 1700s, and educate yourself about the problem. If you haven't already done so, I highly recommend reading Financial Tyranny for a no-holds-barred investigation into who and what these people are. The Russian network REN-TV made 2 3-hour documentaries out of financial tyranny that I was featured in, reaching an estimated 21 million viewers. In fact, REN-TV executives told me this was the most popular primetime special they had ever produced. It will take time for people to adjust. Once we get disclosure and a revealing of the truth, most people are going to need serious time and energy to adjust to all the new information. The more you study up about these things before the dam breaks, the more you will be able to help people who will be shocked and disgusted by the news. Everyone will realize how much they have been lied to, and be able to live much happier lives. On the positive side, the Alliance is working out the details of apology and relief payments everyone will receive as a part of the healing process. It may take a while and be rough in the beginning, but everyone will realize how much they have been lied to, and be able to live much happier lives. Financial Tyranny now has over 2 million unique views and is completely free, unlike our New York Times bestsellers Sourcefield and The Synchronicity Key. It is not only impossible but unwise to attempt to summarize all of the data in each new article. The book has already been written. The bottom line is that this group is very real. The Paris shootings may have been a sloppy act of desperation that has finally revealed what ISIS really is. There is serious trouble for ISIS and the people financing them. Did you notice how strange it was that the US is supposedly fighting ISIS, but then Russia went in and did far more damage? This is awkward for the West. The Russians are wiping out the same enemy the West is also supposedly fighting against. Whatever happened to the enemy of my enemy is my friend? The whole story became even more outrageous after Turkey, a U.S. ally, shot down Russian planes bombarding ISIS. In order to understand the massive 3-day Russian surge against ISIS that was announced on November 9, a bit of backstory is necessary first. November 6, Cabal takes out a top Putin ally who was probably coordinating disclosure. Russia's airliner was downed on October 31. Then the founder of Russia's main media outlet, Russia Today, died suspiciously in a DC hotel on November 6. This event was almost completely overlooked by American media, but is of tremendous significance to our story. Mikhail Lezin actually founded Russia Today. He worked at high levels of the Russian government, served as Putin's press secretary and was still a major media kingpin at his time of death. This means he was undoubtedly one of a select few who had earned a very high level of trust. He would also have had critical knowledge of the Alliance, and was almost certainly a key player in the effort to restore peace and freedom on Earth. Lezin may have been in Washington, D.C. to organize a massive release of Snowden-type data. In case you haven't already noticed, Russia Today has been leaking an incredible amount of data exposing the Cabal, particularly in the last few years. It is very likely that Lezin was in DC to coordinate a major data dump of information through Russia Today, working with Pentagon members of the Alliance. Multiple insiders have been telling us that such a data dump is rapidly approaching, and that Russia is of key importance in coordinating the process. Notice that Daily Mail considers Lezin's death so obviously suspicious that they put the term heart attack in quotation marks. There are the usual smears in this article to try to make Lezin look bad, so the reader may be inclined to feel happy that he died. This includes showing him with a young wife and a glass of champagne, flaunting his wealth and making accusations of money laundering. It is also interesting that Russia Today is labeled as a propaganda bullhorn, considering the degree of damning information it has released against the Cabal. Many times the Cabal engages in projection, accusing the brave people fighting them of doing the same criminal activities they are doing. Huffington Post had a much more polite response. The Huffington Post gave more information about Lezin's loss without the obvious propaganda bias seen in the Daily Mail article. A critical detail is included in the Huffington Post version. Lezin did not drop out of the Russian government after 2009. Instead, he had become a senior executive at Russia's largest media holding company. This means he was still very deeply involved when he died. 11/7, Russia Today creator found dead in Washington hotel, Washington, app. Mikhail Lezin, a former aide to Russian President Vladimir Putin who helped found the English-language news service Russia Today, has been found dead in an upscale Washington hotel room. The Russian embassy in Washington on Friday confirmed the death of Lezin, whose body was discovered Thursday. Russia Today reported on its website that Lezin, 57, died of a heart attack. Metropolitan Police Department spokesman Officer Sean Hickman said that officers were called to the DuPont Circle Hotel about 11:30 a.m. Thursday and found a man dead. Russian embassy spokesman Yuri Melnik confirmed that the man was Lezin. Russia Today, commonly known as RT, credited Lezin with inspiring the creation of the agency. Lezin served as Russian press minister from 1999 to 2004 and presidential media advisor from 2004 to 2009, RT said. He then became a senior executive at Gazprom Media, Russia's largest media holding company. A word to the wise, insiders have told me that if you have reason to fear for your life, never order room service in a hotel. There are plenty of untraceable drugs that can induce a heart attack, such as those that are made out of shellfish toxin. They can easily be introduced into food, shot into you with a tiny ice dart, or even placed on the handle of a bathroom sink right before you use it. November 7, next day, Pentagon test fires nuclear missile, shoots it in Russia and China's direction. Do you believe in coincidence? How far are you willing to stretch that belief? Isn't it strange that on the very next day, the U.S. test-fired a Trident II nuclear missile, and sent it off in the direction of Russia and China? This was no ordinary test. It created the brightest, most visible and astonishing light show over the entire West Coast in quite some time, maybe ever. As a result, hundreds of thousands of people thought they were seeing a UFO, and set off a firestorm of tweets, videos and speculation on the internet. In order to create such bright visuals, the launch had to be timed perfectly with the sunset, so the light would catch it just right. 11/7, naval missile test causes bright light to streak across sky. A missile test flight from a submarine left hundreds of people from Southern California to Nevada and Arizona perplexed as it caused a bright light to streak across the sky Saturday night. The Pentagon issued a statement that the Navy Strategic Systems Programs conducted a scheduled test of a Trident II, D5, missile from USS Kentucky, an Ohio-class submarine. The missile was not armed, according to the statement, and tests are conducted on a frequent, recurring basis to ensure reliability of the system. Residents from Ventura to as far as Nevada and Arizona took photos and videos of the strange phenomenon around 6 p.m. It is unclear if the flight diversions of Los Angeles International Airport planes over the Pacific has to do with the missile tests. Twitter users became engaged in a heated debate over the origins of the bright light, claiming it was not a missile test but that it could have been a UFO or a comet. The light show was obviously deliberate. The Washington Post soon revealed that this move seems to have been shrewdly calculated to threaten Russia and China. 11/10, California missile test, social media nightmare or exactly what the Navy wanted? There's no longer any doubt that thousands of West Coasters witnessed an unarmed missile, and not a comet or an alien craft, streaking across the sky Saturday night. What remains open to interpretation? Why? Why test fire a missile within sight of the nation's second-largest city, terrifying some and leading thousands more to flood Twitter and Facebook with wild speculation about the glowing craft? Mysterious light blazes across California sky, sparking confusion, excitement and fears of alien invasion. Did the Navy think the test would go largely unnoticed by the public? Did officials underestimate social media's ability to turn a routine event into front-page fodder? Or was that the plan all along, using the inevitable influence of social media to flex America's military might for observers in Beijing and Moscow? The answer: it's complicated. According to John Daniels, a public affairs officer for the Navy's Strategic Systems Programs, Saturday's test occurred during unique conditions, on an exceptionally clear evening, with the sun disappearing on the horizon at just the right time. The Navy has performed similar launches many times, Daniels said, but never with effects so visible that they caught people's attention from San Francisco to Arizona. That big, bluish-green hue that everyone saw was a result of just that time of day, Daniels said, noting that the fading sunlight was reflected from the rocket's motor. Had we done it earlier in the day or later in evening, you would have still seen the missile, but probably not the same way. Don't freak out. Russia's passenger airliner was shot down on October 31st. One of their top media coordinators died mysteriously in a DC hotel on November 6. Then, the very next day, the U.S. does a missile test over Los Angeles that creates a huge light show. The missile was flown up the coast and then out towards Russia and China. This brazen, massive event over a major population center could easily generate fear of a thermonuclear World War III. There are greater forces at work here. Our insiders have revealed that there are benevolent angelic ETs out there, and they will not allow a major nuke like this to be detonated on Earth. Countless acts of divine intervention have been taking place, particularly since 2010, making it utterly impossible for the cabal to enact their ugliest plans. This was recently highlighted in articles quoting revered NASA, Apollo astronaut and moonwalker Edgar Mitchell. This is only one of countless dozens of disclosure-related articles that have emerged in the past few years, preparing us for an official announcement. 8/12. Edgar Mitchell claims ET saved America from nuclear war. Aliens came to Earth to stop a nuclear war between America and Russia, according to the bizarre claim of a former astronaut. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon, says high-ranking military officials witnessed alien ships during weapons tests throughout the 1940s. The UFOs, he says, were spotted hovering over the world's first nuclear weapons test, which took place on July 16, 1945 in the desolate White Sands deserts of New Mexico. The NASA veteran has regularly spoken about his belief in aliens ever since he landed on the surface of the moon during the Apollo 14 mission in 1971. White Sands was a testing ground for atomic weapons, and that's what the extraterrestrials were interested in, the 84-year-old Texan told Mirror Online. They wanted to know about our military capabilities. My own experience talking to people, equals insiders, has made it clear the ETs had been attempting to keep us from going to war and to help create peace on Earth. Dr. Mitchell says stories from people who manned missile bases during the 20th century back up his claims. Other officers from bases on the Pacific coast told me their test missiles were frequently shot down by alien spacecraft, he said. He claimed our technology is not nearly as sophisticated as theirs, and had they been hostile, he warned, we would be been gone by now. Russia's retaliation. Russia is the home of the greatest chess masters and strategists in the world. Move, counter-move. Point, counterpoint. They lose a plane, they lose one of their top media coordinators, and then a nuclear missile is test-fired in their direction, all in just over a week. Russia massively bombarded 448 ISIS facilities almost immediately after the Halloween airliner attack, Lezin's heart attack on November 6, and the missile test on the 7th. 448 bases might not sound like much, but this was the vast majority of the infrastructure of ISIS, as we will see. These 3 days of intense bombing were publicized on November 9, and were extremely devastating. 11/9, Russian Air Force destroys 448 terrorist facilities in Syria over 3 days. The Russian Air Force in Syria has made 137 sorties over last 3 days, hitting 448 infrastructure facilities belonging to Islamic State and other terrorist groups in the country, Russia's defense ministry said. Over the last 3 days, Russian jets made 137 sorties in the Syrian Arab Republic and destroyed 448 facilities of terrorist infrastructure in the provinces of Aleppo, Damascus, Idlib, Latakia, Raqqa, Hama and Homs. Igor Konashenkov, spokesman for the Defense Ministry, was cited as saying by TASS. Remember that number. 448 different facilities critical to the ISIS infrastructure were destroyed. This has produced much greater results than the media has been reporting, up until recently. More on that in a second. Cutting OFF the oil supply. If you have studied World War II, then you understand how absolutely crucial the oil supply is to any war effort. Without oil and gas, you cannot run the machines. The profits from the sale of oil and gas can also be of critical importance in providing revenue for food and supplies to an army as well, particularly in the Middle East. This is precisely why Putin took out a massive convoy of ISIS oil trucks, which was announced on November 18, just 9 days after the destruction of the 448 facilities. 11/18, Russian warplanes destroy 500 terrorist oil trucks in Syria, destroying main source of funding and fuel. Around 500 fuel tanker vehicles transporting illegal oil from Syria to Iraq for processing have been destroyed by Russia's air forces, the General Staff said. In recent years, Islamic State, IS, formerly ISIS, ISIL, and other extremist groups have organized the operations of the so-called pipeline on wheels on the territories they control, Russian General Staff spokesman Colonel General Andrei Kartapolov said. Hundreds of thousands of tons of fuel have been delivered to Iraq for processing by trucks, and the revenue generated from these illegal exports is one of the terrorists' main sources of funding, he said. The spokesman displayed images showing convoys comprised of hundreds of vehicles transporting oil to back his assertion. In just the first few days, our aviation has destroyed 500 fuel tanker trucks, which greatly reduced illegal oil export capabilities of the militants and, accordingly, their income from oil smuggling, Kartapolov stressed. The spokesman also said that the Russian military has begun developing proposals for joint military action with the French Navy against the terrorists in accordance with an order by President Vladimir Putin. 11/18, Daily Mail on Russian bombardment of ISIS oil supplies. Last month it was revealed ISIS is still making more than £320 million a year from oil, despite the US-led bombing campaign which was meant to break up the insurgency. This is where we must hit Daesh, in its lifeblood, said French Defense Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian, using the Arabic acronym for the group. Despite their diametrically opposed stances on Assad, France and Russia agreed to coordinate their military and security services to fight ISIS after the attacks in Paris and the downing of the Russian airliner. The vast wealth generated by oil fields, power plants, extortion, taxes, and the pillaging of antiquities means ISIS is the most well-funded terrorist group in history, experts have warned. The U.S. left these oil convoys alone. Everett Stearns' HSBC testimony strongly suggests the reason ISIS is so well-funded is that it is receiving hundreds of millions of dollars from Western banks. It is also noteworthy to point out that the U.S. conveniently overlooked these oil convoys for the preceding year, claiming they didn't want to kill innocent people. 11/19, U.S. conveniently avoided bombing ISIS oil convoys. Bloomberg suggests the Pentagon routinely declined to take out tanker trucks for fear of collateral damage. None of these guys are ISIS. We don't feel right vaporizing them, so we have been watching ISIS oil flowing around for a year, Michael Knights, an Iraq expert at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy told Bloomberg. So sure, perhaps the U.S. overestimated the effect its airstrikes were having on Islamic State's oil production capabilities. And perhaps the Pentagon was concerned with killing innocent truck drivers. It could also be that, as Sergei Lavrov suggested earlier this week, the U.S. has until now intentionally avoided hitting ISIS where it hurts in order to keep them in the game and ensure they can still be effective at destabilizing Assad, the president of Syria. If you cut off the oil trade, they, ISIS, lose the ability to battle their regime. Taking credit for other people's work. In an even more surreal moment, PBS used Russian military footage of the destruction of ISIS oil tankers and claimed the U.S. did it. 11:23, epic bombing fail. PBS uses Russian footage to depict U.S. airstrikes on ISIS oil fields, apparently being unable to find any footage of the U.S. Air Force strikes against Islamic State's oil infrastructure. PBS NewsHour spliced Russian Defense Ministry's video into their report, but it did not go unnoticed. The PBS report last week used two objective control videos made by Russian drones while Sukhoi bombers based at Khmeimim airfield in Latakia bombed out an oil storage facility in Syria used by ISIS and a large camp of oil trucks. While showing black and white military footage of burning trucks, the PBS voiceover says, "For the first time, the U.S. is attacking oil delivery trucks." The fact was first noticed by the Moon of Alabama website, which noted that any average viewer of the PBS report would assume that the black and white explosions of oil trucks and tanks are from U.S. airstrikes filmed by U.S. Air Force planes. "We had destroyed 116 tanker trucks and reduced ISIS's ability to transport stolen oil," reported Colonel Steve Warren, spokesman for the Combined Joint Task Force, on November 18, after 15 months of bombing ISIS. He noted it was the first U.S. strike against ISIS tanker trucks in Syria. "But unless we have U.S. video of such strikes and not copies of Russian strike videos fraudulently passed off as U.S. strikes, we will not know if those strikes happened at all," the Moon of Alabama said. Last Wednesday, Russian General Staff spokesman Colonel General Andrei Kartapolov said, "In just the first few days, our aviation has destroyed 500 fuel tanker trucks, which greatly reduced illegal oil export capabilities of the militants and, accordingly, their income from oil smuggling. The damage has been severe, thanks to these attacks, which have all but destroyed the oil supply as well as 448 critical infrastructure bases. ISIS is now left with only 34 bases in total. As a result, it looks like the end for this terrorist group. All of this has happened very recently as of the time we are writing this article in late November. ISIS again is accused of being born by the Westerners in this article from the Russian press. 11:22, this looks like the end. ISIS left with only 34 bases after Russian airstrikes. Syrian and Iraqi troops, supported by Russian airstrikes in Syria, have continued to advance on Islamic State militants, leaving the jihadist group with just 34 bases in these two Arab countries, the Iranian news agency Fars quoted a media activist as saying. At present, ISIL only has 34 bases in Mosul, Raqqa, etc., which were many more in number. Muhammad Ali al-Hakim, managing director of Iraq's Al-Nakil news agency, said. According to him, the Islamic State may finally be destroyed in the foreseeable future. The end of the ISIL which has been born by the Westerners is close, he said. ISIS fought back, while on the brink of defeat, by attacking Paris. Remember the dates. In 3 days, Russia destroyed 448 critical ISIS facilities and took out 500 oil tankers soon afterwards. These attacks have brought ISIS, and the people funding and manipulating them, to the brink of defeat. Russia's latest attacks have brought ISIS to the brink of defeat. If they no longer have ISIS, they cannot make random and violent attacks against the alliance anywhere in the world. The near-complete decapitation of ISIS was announced on November 9. The Paris attacks occurred only 4 days later, on Friday the 13th, by ISIS. These attacks have become the subject of tremendous scrutiny ever since. You will probably be hearing the term false flag attack much more in the near future, when an attack takes place and is blamed on a fake villain, such as a targeted country. It is called a false flag attack in military lingo. This means the country that was accused of perpetrating the attack is a false distraction. That country, that flag, is not really responsible. Angry villagers may hold up the false flag, scream at it and burn it, not realizing that someone else perpetrated the attacks for a completely different reason. The flag currently being blamed is the black and white ISIS design we keep seeing. There are thousands of articles and videos already available deconstructing the Paris attacks as a massive false flag operation. The reason we are summarizing data like this all at once is that single articles on single events do not have enough backstory to explain the big picture. ISIS attacks perpetrated by white military agents WHO look like weightlifters. Let's be clear, there certainly are real Muslims in ISIS, not just a bunch of paid white mercenary guys. However, if you do your homework, you will find that white military-looking assassins appeared at the scene of the Paris shootings as well. The cabal apparently wanted to punish France for cooperating with the alliance and bringing down the Federal Reserve, which we will discuss as we go on. This attack hurt France in a major way, hitting their most beloved city. It also punished Russia for decapitating ISIS by attacking one of Russia's allies. ISIS is now on a very rapid decline, but there was still enough left of it to produce a convincing false flag operation like this. In order to ensure the job would be done right the first time, the cabal used their best people, who had many years of the best training money could buy. 1114, Paris shooters were white, muscular, military and expressionless. Two heavily armed ISIS gunmen pulled up in a black Mercedes-Benz and calmly slaughtered scores of innocent diners in a Paris bistro before driving away. An eyewitness has told how 20 people were executed in a calculated attack on a busy restaurant in the heart of the French capital as they ate at tables on the pavement. Mohamed Mo said, the gunman showed no emotion at all as he began spraying bullets into the diners. He just kept reloading his machine gun and firing, without saying a thing. Mr. Edmo, 26, who was staying at the Salvation Army hostel in Rue de Char opposite the La Belle Équipe, told how gunmen executed patrons in a drive-by attack. Trembling as he recalled how the massacre unfolded, he said, I was just in my room and had the window open onto the street below. I could see lots people sat outside the bar eating dinner and enjoying a drink. The place was full of people just enjoying themselves. At about 9:30 p.m. a new-looking black Mercedes pulled up outside with dark-tinted windows at the back and the passenger and driver windows down. I could clearly see the passenger's face as he was not wearing a hat or mask. As soon as the car stopped, he quietly opened the door and got out in front of the restaurant. That is when I saw he was holding a machine gun that was resting on his hip. I could not take in what I was witnessing. People outside spotted the shooter approaching with his gun and tried to run inside, but he shot them down in the doorway. Then people inside moved forward to see what was happening and he sprayed more bullets into them. I was trying to catch them on my camera phone, but the gunman saw the light on my mobile and I ducked down behind the wall as they fired at my hotel. The gunman calmly reloaded his weapon several times. He then shot up at the windows in the street to make sure nobody was filming anything or taking photographs. It lasted over 6 minutes. Now check this out, as our excerpt continues, we get to the critical moment where our eyewitness reveals what these emotionless attackers actually looked like. The answer is shocking. What would happen if the Western political machine started telling us that elite white mercenaries were working for ISIS? This would raise all sorts of questions. Why would supposedly die-hard Islamic fundamentalists ever trust white special ops troops? It would be no different than an obvious narc walking up to a bunch of hippies, trying to sound cool and asking if he could score a bag of weed. However, in this case the narc isn't interested in putting you in jail. He's going to call in a drone strike that will kill you and all of your friends. Wouldn't ISIS have plenty of people willing to go and kill the infidel without risking their most serious operations in the hands of white foreigners? This could trigger a domino effect. With the witness testimony you are about to read in hand, the questions then become, who are these white troops? Who is paying them to kill innocent people having dinner in Paris? And why? If the public started asking these questions, such as in a Snowden-type information leak, it could easily start a domino effect of disclosure. The Mirror is a mainstream paper in the UK, and as we have seen, the UK press is well ahead of the US in leaking the truth. 1114, Paris shooters were white, muscular, military and expressionless. He fired lots of bullets. He was white, clean-shaven and had dark hair neatly trimmed. He was dressed all in black except for a red scarf. The shooter was aged about 35 and had an extremely muscular build, which you could tell from the size of his arms. He looked like a weightlifter. He was not wearing gloves and his face was expressionless as he walked towards the bar. The driver had opened his door shortly before the shooting began and stood up with his arm and a machine gun rested on the roof of the car. He stood there with his foot up in the door acting as a lookout. I would describe him as tall, with dark hair and also quite muscular. They looked like soldiers or mercenaries and carried the whole thing out like a military operation. It was clear that they were both very heavily armed and the gunman was carrying several magazines on him. They both then coolly sat back in the car and sped off in the direction of the Bataclan Theater. It is a combination of both white mercenaries and Arab attackers. As we documented in Financial Tyranny, the Western media monopoly is controlled by the same megabanks earning 80% of all the wealth in the world. We have been manipulated into seeing the Paris shootings as being conducted by wild, screaming Arabs praising Allah as they commit jihad. The idea of jacked-up white military dudes carrying out the Paris killings, with no visible sign of anger, pleasure or stress, is certainly not what we would expect. Elite white mercenaries were used to carry out the Paris shootings. The cabal used its best people to make sure the job was done right. However, if ISIS is a Western-controlled proxy army, they may well use highly trained white mercenaries to ensure the job gets done right the first time. This would be a far more violent and risky assignment than sending in a 5-man team to make it look like someone committed suicide. Arab patsies are then set up to take the blame, such as by blowing themselves up with suicide bombs at the crime scenes. People with extreme religious beliefs are much easier to manipulate into committing suicide attacks against others they see as devils. If someone comes in as a strong and charismatic leader, tells them what they want to hear and offers them support to attack the devils, they will gladly comply. ISIS just so happens to be using hundreds of millions of dollars worth of American weapons. In case you are still not convinced that ISIS is a creature of the West, here is yet another critical piece of data you must consider. When a fully funded, massive military force suddenly appears out of nowhere, and just so happens to be using American weapons, we become suspicious. It appears that the cabal deliberately allowed ISIS to capture a host of top-quality American weapons from various supply depots in Iraq. There may also have been certain places, Benghazi, where the weapons and ammunition were being directly provided to ISIS. Oops, looks like the US accidentally armed ISIS by allowing them to capture all the best military equipment. June 4, 2015, US shoots itself in the foot by accidentally arming ISIS. One of the earliest major setbacks in the war against ISIS came last June when the U.S.-backed Iraqi army was routed by Islamic militants in the northern Iraq city of Mosul. Government forces retreated from the Islamic jihadists' assault. They left behind a trove of costly military hardware, including U.S.-made armored Humvees, trucks, rockets, machine guns and even a helicopter. According to Reuters, the U.S.-made weaponry that fell into enemy hands including 2,300 Humvee armored vehicles, at least 40 M1A1 main battle tanks, 74,000 machine guns, and as many as 52 M198 howitzer mobile gun systems, plus small arms and ammunition. Although al-Abadi and other Iraqi and U.S. officials haven't attached a $sign to the lost weaponry and vehicles, a back-of-the-envelope calculation of those losses might look something like this: 2,300 Humvee armored vehicles at $70,000 per unit. Total, $161 million, 40 M1A1 Abrams tanks at $4.3 million per unit. Total, $172 million, 52 M198 howitzer mobile gun systems at $527,337 per unit. Total, $27.4 million, 74,000 Army machine guns at $4,000 per unit. Total, $296 million. The grand total comes to $656.4 million, but experts say those losses represent just a portion of the many hundreds of millions of dollars worth of U.S. supplied military equipment that has fallen into ISIS's hands. This equipment is being used against the U.S. and allied forces on the ground in Iraq and neighboring Syria. Still not convinced? ISIS found all these treasure chests of American weapons and ammunition just waiting to be used. That's the official story. It's like a video game where you just jump around collecting gold coins everywhere you go. They're all just magically laid out, waiting for you to come along. If you still want to believe that ISIS just got lucky, and they were never intended to get these weapons, check this out. The political watchdog Judicial Watch managed to declassify Pentagon documents revealing the U.S. is secretly supporting Al-Qaeda and ISIS-linked groups. Uh-oh, this doesn't look good at all. 626, declassified documents reveal U.S. support of Al-Qaeda and ISIS-linked rebel groups. Declassified Pentagon documents recently obtained by political watchdog Judicial Watch revealed that the U.S. has deliberately supported Al-Qaeda and other radical groups in an attempt to destabilize Syria. As noted by insurgent intelligence writer Nafiz Ahmed, the U.S. went forward with the policy despite admittedly knowing it would lead to the rise of ISIS in the fall of Iraq. According to the newly declassified U.S. documents, the Pentagon foresaw the likely rise of the Islamic State as a direct consequence of this strategy, and warned that it could destabilize Iraq, Ahmed wrote. Despite anticipating that Western, Gulf state and Turkish support for the Syrian opposition which included Al-Qaeda in Iraq could lead to the emergence of an Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, ISIS, the document provides no indication of any decision to reverse the policy of support to the Syrian rebels. Since the secret 2012 report was written, the Obama administration has continued its support of so-called rebel groups despite their admitted ties with ISIS. Just last September, a commander with the Free Syrian Army, FSA, a group deemed moderate by the president, admitted to cooperating with multiple terrorist groups including ISIS. CBS journalist covers declassified Pentagon documents on ISIS. In an astonishing act of bravery, CBS journalist Ben Swann did a news segment on these Pentagon document leaks, clearly showing the U.S. supported ISIS. 1119, reality check, proof U.S. government wanted ISIS to emerge in Syria. There is so much debate over how the U.S. and other nations will stop ISIS, but can these leaders be trusted? Ben Swann exposes secret DoD documents that prove the U.S. wanted ISIS to emerge in Syria. The video is definitely worth watching, as it shows that the media stranglehold on the truth is finally starting to break down. ISIS popped up just in time to make a war against Syria legal by UN standards. It is also very strange to note how ISIS just sprang up out of nowhere in the media on September 20, 2013, armed to the teeth with top American weapons. Thanks to brave whistleblowers like Everett Stern, we now know the mega banks are financing groups like this all over the world. ISIS popped up precisely when they were needed, with all the best US-made toys, in order to legalize the cabal's latest war by UN legal standards. Consider this comment posted on Monday, November 17, 2015 in Benjamin Fulford's forum by Omgu. Comment by Omgu on November 17, 2015 at 12:58 a.m. ISIS as we know it only became news on 20th September 2013. The UK Parliament voted against attacking Syria on 30th August 2013. This UK vote caused Obama to abruptly change course the following day on 31st August, and instead seek authorization from Congress. Events later unfolded that then stopped the Congress vote, due to Russia getting involved. Russia arranged for Syria to dispose of its chemical weapons, which removed the excuse for war. The date the congressional vote was stopped appears to be around 14th September 2013. Bear in mind that during all of this talk of war, there was no UN mandate. Therefore, declaring war on Syria would have been an illegal action under UN law, just like Iraq. When did the first news article appear mentioning ISIS? 20th September 2013. Just 6 days after the congressional vote was stopped. You can prove this for yourselves by going to Google, searching for ISIS and then clicking News. Click Search Tools, Recent, Custom Range and set a custom date range of, say, January 1, 2010 to September 19, 2013. The search for ISIS will only bring up the goddess Isis and some mobile card payment stuff. Change that final date to September 20, 2013, and the terrorist ISIS stories start. Several groups working to expose this, brave and heroic whistleblower sites like Veterans Today and InfoWars have been exposing this scam for some time now, and so have we. Proxy war is how the real powers behind the scenes have been manipulating political events to their advantage for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The power elite always use someone else to do their dirty work. If the mercenaries themselves don't know who they are really working for, they can't rat out their controllers even if they get captured and tortured. However, with the communication and surveillance tech available to everyone in today's world, it is no longer possible to play these games in secret. The ISIS press release claiming responsibility for the Paris attacks may have been written by the cabal, even in mainstream media. There are ongoing clues that ISIS is just a front for something much bigger and more powerful, as we have just discussed. Consider this Politico article from November 14, discussing the mystery of the Paris shootings being blamed on ISIS and how it just doesn't add up. The reason it smells fishy, in this case, is the group posing as ISIS did not take credit for these attacks in any normal way. It's as if someone in the West wrote their own press release and designed it to look like their Arab patsies and ISIS had written it. Politico noticed that this was sloppy work, and did not appear to have been written by real Muslims at all. 1114, ISIS mystery, who's calling the shots? This morning, Islamic State channels pushed out official statements praising the attacks. Many have read this message, which gloated and moralized and promised a torrent of future attacks, as a claim of credit. But the statement gave no indication of having planned or funded the attack, and indeed the message contained no information other than what the authors could have learned from reading their doorstep copy of the Washington Post. It did not give the martyrs their customary send-off to paradise, with smiling photos showing hairy faces and index fingers extended to heaven, nor an interview, or even mention of a nom de guerre. Moreover, the statement contained infelicities of style and spelling, as if it had been written and translated without the Islamic State's usual editorial punctiliousness. One explanation for this hurried claim of credit or endorsement may be that there exists a third possibility, somewhere between is did it and the increasingly far-fetched is didn't. That possibility is something like is was surprised by what its supporters did, and maybe not altogether pleased. ISIS couldn't have shot down the Russian plane either. The Paris mass shooting happened on Friday the 13th. The Russian airliner was downed on All Hallows Eve, or what most call Halloween, October 31st. Is this also just a coincidence? Both Friday the 13th and Halloween could be considered ritual holidays for groups that actively worship and practice what most people would call evil. Now let's go back to the downed airliner. Russia's own mainstream media, Russia Today, firmly established that ISIS could not have done this. 11:1, RT, what we do and don't know after Russia's deadliest ever air crash, how did the plane crash? The head of Russian aviation agency Rosaviatsa, Alexander Neradko, has said that all signs testify to the fact that the destruction of the structure of the airplane took place in the air and at a great altitude. The principal evidence is that the remains of the plane and the bodies have been scattered over an area measuring about 8 kilometers by 4 kilometers. An Egyptian military source told the media that the plane cracked open into 2 main segments, one of which collided with a rock on impact. WHYDID crash? This is the big question. As of now, Islamic State is, formerly ISIS/ISIL-affiliated militants, based in Sinai, stole a march on officials, when they claimed responsibility for the downing of the plane. Russian authorities, backed up by Egyptian officials, have dismissed the boasts as being out of hand. They said, the terrorists in the region do not possess the specialized equipment necessary to shoot down a large passenger jet flying at cruising height. The only possible explanation is an external impact, but from WHO? This article from the Huffington Post clearly establishes that all arrows point towards this being a missile attack against the Russian airliner. The problem, as you just read, ISIS does not possess the specialized equipment necessary to have done this, even with their stolen US weapons. They would need surface-to-air missiles that could reach spectacular heights, or jets with launchable missiles, and they have neither. 11 halves, Russian airline rules out mechanical failure and crash, St. Petersburg, Russia, app. Only an external impact could have caused the crash of a Russian plane in Egypt that killed all 224 people on board, a top airline official said Monday, raising more questions about what exactly happened. "We rule out a technical fault of the plane or a pilot error," said Alexander Smirnov, Deputy General Director of Metrojet. "The only possible explanation could be an external impact on the airplane." But when pressed for more details about what type of impact and what could have caused it, Smirnov insisted that he was not at liberty to discuss details because the investigation was ongoing. Victor Young, another Deputy Director General of Metrojet, said the crew did not send a distress call and they did not contact traffic controllers before the crash. Smirnov also said the plane dropped 300 kph, 186 miles per hour, in speed and 1.5 kilometers, about 5,000 feet, in altitude 1 minute before it crashed into Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. The Airbus A321-200 crashed in the Sinai 23 minutes after taking off from the Egyptian Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh en route to St. Petersburg. Alexander Neradko, head of Russia's Federal Aviation Agency, told reporters on Sunday that the large area over which plane debris fragments were found indicates the jet disintegrated while flying at high altitude. He would not comment on any possible reason for the crash, citing the ongoing investigation. The Sodekin bomb, double-check the wording of the Russian investigation above. The only possible explanation of what could have brought the plane down was an external impact. That would require weaponry that ISIS simply does not have, such as jet-launched missiles, but which Western powers easily could have used and blamed on ISIS. On Wednesday, November 18, 2015, the mainstream media tried to wrap up the mystery by claiming ISIS destroyed the airliner with a homemade Sodekin bomb. 11:18. Did ISIS use Sodekin bomb to bring down a Russian plane? If it was so easy to blow up a plane in midair with a single soda can, and get it through security, why did it take terrorists 14 years after 9/11 to do it? And pineapple-flavored Schweppes? That's just gross. The powers that were are hoping that most people will buy this story, even though the Russians completely ruled out all explanations other than an external impact. This means their investigation shows a projectile hit the plane from the outside, causing it to bend inward at the impact site. A bomb from the inside would cause the hull to blow outward, bending the fragments in the opposite direction. What about Turkey? As of November 24, the world is now well aware that Turkey shot down a Russian warplane wiping out whatever is left of ISIS. This makes it far more likely that Turkey may have also shot down the Russian passenger airliner over Egypt. Russia denies entering Turkish airspace at all. A leaked document shows that the decision to shoot down was based on only 17 seconds of time of allegedly crossing the border. Really? Don't you guys think you might want to take a little more time and think this through? Russia has now released video proof that their Su-24 fighter jet never crossed the border into Turkey. It was shot down in a wanton act of aggression. The whole thing doesn't make any sense, unless you consider that ISIS and Turkey are working together. The madness is finally coming to an end. As unpleasant as this will be for many people, Western banks are provably financing terrorism and giving support to ISIS as a proxy army. Thankfully, based on the intel we are getting from trusted insiders, this deadly nonsense and pathological lying will soon be coming to an end. ISIS has been decapitated. It only has 34 bases left and those will soon be destroyed as well. Its oil and money supply has been cut off. Turkey's unprecedented attack against a Russian warplane defeating ISIS is so outrageous that it could blow this whole story wide open. ISIS has to be stopped before large-scale disclosure can occur safely. It has become clear that the alliance is not going to make any large-scale disclosure moves until they solve the problem of ISIS. Think about it. If the alliance is preparing to expose the cabal in a worldwide fashion, It would be necessary to decapitate their terrorist army first. Otherwise, there could be a whole cluster of Paris-style attacks as the alliance makes its final push for freedom. Whistleblowers have told us this is exactly what we are seeing. The cabal needs a working, believable patsy like ISIS so they can continue fooling the public into thinking someone else is responsible for these attacks. The alliance is hitting ISIS as hard as they can right now, knowing the risks, because it doesn't take the cabal very long to plan out new attacks. New evidence linking Bush administration to 9/11 reaching mainstream media. The Paris attacks were far more orchestrated and coordinated than anything ISIS had ever done before. The degree of organization and sophistication of these shootings is reminiscent of 9/11, which has been very thoroughly researched. The mainstream media is now getting much more bold in linking 9/11 directly to the Bush administration, as this Politico article revealed on November 12. Given their history, it is easy to hate on the CIA, but multiple insiders we have direct access to have indicated that a counter-coup has occurred there. A majority of CIA personnel are now actively working against the cabal. This appears to be one of their more public moves to date, supporting our intel. 11/12, Bush admin ignored CIA warnings of spectacular attacks before 9/11, Bin Laden determined to strike in U.S., the CIA's famous presidential daily brief, presented to George W. Bush on August 6, 2001, has always been exhibit A in the case that his administration shrugged off warnings of an al-Qaeda attack. But months earlier, starting in the spring of 2001, the CIA repeatedly and urgently began to warn the White House that an attack was coming. By May of 2001, says Cofer Black, then chief of the CIA's Counterterrorism Center, it was very evident that we were going to be struck. We were gonna be struck hard and lots of Americans were going to die. There were real plots being manifested, Cofer's former boss, CIA Director, George Tenet, told me in his first interview in 8 years. The world felt like it was on the edge of eruption. In this time period of June and July, the threat continues to rise. Terrorists were disappearing, as if in hiding, in preparation for an attack. Camps were closing. Threat reporting's on the rise. The crisis came to a head on July 10. The critical meeting that took place that day was first reported by Bob Woodward in 2006. Tenet also wrote about it in general terms in his 2007 memoir At the Center of the Storm. But neither he nor Black has spoken about it publicly in such detail until now, or been so emphatic about how specific and pressing their warnings really were. You start seeing things in a whole new way, once you see 9/11 as being a false flag attack by the Bush administration, to ram through the Patriot Act and start 2 new wars. Anything is possible. The Republican neocon faction told people what they wanted to hear, and maintained significant support numbers after 9/11, at least until Katrina. Now, it seems like the only campaign promise they can make is, well, Obama really pissed you off. So come on guys, just give us another chance. This made it all the more surreal that the next presidential election in America was looking like a staged battle between Clinton and Bush. Really? Then Trump came along with the confidence, experience and IQ needed to campaign well, and told the conservative base exactly what they wanted to hear. Insiders have confirmed that Trump is not a part of the cabal's plan. He has 6 bodyguards around him at all times to thwart cabal-ordered assassinations. And you have to love the synchronicity of his name. This Trump card has completely upset the game. The media is scrambling to try to make voters hate him. The problem is that they assume their viewers are extremely ignorant. They are not. They have just been lied to for so long that it is painful to see the truth. Jeb. And the holograms. Things got really quiet, almost serene, while the powers that were wanted the public, at least the conservative half of America, to fall in love with Jeb. It reminded me of those films of women with bruises talking about the man who had beaten them, when I was training for the suicide hotline. As part of our training, we had to watch these stomach-churning videos where women who cannot open their eyes are saying I still love him. Thankfully, the public is nowhere near as ignorant as the cabal has tried to make them. As a collective, we do not want to return to the abuser. It was amusing that a movie with a name very similar to Jeb, that is Jem and the Holograms, had one of the worst debuts of all time right as Jeb collapsed. There may be a theme here. The public doesn't want to vote with their wallets to watch a remake of an 80s cartoon. And someone needs to talk to the leader of the band about proper strumming technique. Look at the timing. Conservatives, as a whole, now seem to know even more about the New World Order than the other political factions. Jeb may well be a member of the greatest terrorist family of all time. If we get disclosure, this will almost certainly become common public knowledge. If Jeb had managed to win or steal the election, things could have taken a very sharp turn for the worse, given the history of this crime family. As soon as it became clear that Bush couldn't possibly win, all the headline-stealing terrorist violence started up again. Now that may be a coincidence. Or not. Remember, the ISIS proxy army hit the Russian airliner on October 31st, rocketing us out of a surprisingly quiet September and October. October 31st was the very next day after Jeb lost all hope of winning the Republican nomination for president, and fired his chief operating officer. 10/23, Jeb Bush orders pay cuts for struggling campaign. 10/26, Bush family gathers to rescue Jeb. 10/26, Jem and the Holograms has one of the worst film openings in Hollywood history. 10/29, Insiders, Bush bombed. 10/29, Jeb Bush's comeback strategy backfires at GOP debate. 10:30, Jeb's team fires chief operating officer, down to 7th place. 10:30, Jeb Bush's performance disastrous at last debate. 10:31, Russian plane crash in Egypt kills all 224 people aboard. 11 halves, Jeb Bush reboots his campaign for the 5th time. 11 fourths, Jeb Bush death spiral. 4% approval ratings. Grandiose love bombing followed by more violence. Victims of domestic violence get grandiose gestures of apology after they have been abused. This is a strategy all abusers use to reel them back in. Maybe this time it will get better. Maybe now the violence will stop. Look at the positive. Things may finally be changing. They get back together and something goes wrong. It becomes clear that the abuse is not going to stop. Nothing has changed. All the patterns reappear. Then, if they make any effort to get away from the abuser, the violence starts all over again. Millions of us are going through horrible ordeals like this. The sad part is that in dreams I had about Jeb while he was losing, he didn't strike me as a bad guy. I almost didn't even want to write this section. In fact, I got the sense that Jeb may have hoped to do things differently, while being very aware of the cabal and what they would force upon him. Remember, everyone is an individual with complex emotions. There are plenty of examples of people within the system attempting to run things their own way. Nonetheless, the public spoke very clearly, never again. Just think it through. The cabal speaks to its members, as well as to the rest of us, as if they are so powerful that it is useless to resist them. Yet, in order to maintain this illusion, they saturate the alternative media with propaganda on an unprecedented scale. The propaganda goes far beyond just a few fake ISIS beheading videos to create terror. We have had countless hours of fun with the people paid by the cabal to write hypercritical comments on these articles. It has been fascinating to see the psychological profiling they do. In a sense it is a blessing, as it roots out any personal weaknesses even faster. Some of the haters are real, but a surprisingly high number of them are not. We have been saying this for years, and now it is no longer a secret. This fact was proven more clearly than ever in the latest round of Snowden documents, which received far less attention from the media. 622, new Snowden data indicates spy services are the real internet trolls. Glenn Greenwald at The Intercept provides new material from the Snowden stash. The British Government Communications Headquarters, GCHQ, includes a joint threat research and intelligence group which provides most of GCHQ's cyber effects and online human capability. It currently lies at the leading edge of cyber influence practice and expertise. In 2011 the JSTRG had 120 people on its staff. Here are some of its methods. used in support of British policies like for regime change in Syria, through ISIS, and Zimbabwe. All of JTRIG's operations are conducted using cyber technology. Staff described a range of methods, techniques that have been used to date for conducting effects operations. These included uploading YouTube videos containing persuasive communications, to discredit, promote distrust, dissuade, deter, delay or disrupt, setting up Facebook groups, forums, blogs and Twitter accounts that encourage and monitor discussion on a topic, to discredit, promote distrust, dissuade, deter, delay or disrupt, establishing online aliases, personalities who support the communications or messages in YouTube videos, Facebook groups, forums, blogs etc., establishing online aliases, personalities who support other aliases, sending spoof emails and text messages from a fake person or mimicking a real person, to discredit, promote distrust, dissuade, deceive, deter, delay or disrupt, providing spoof online resources such as magazines and books that provide inaccurate information, to disrupt, delay, deceive, discredit, promote distrust, dissuade, deter or denigrate, degrade, providing online access to uncensored material, to disrupt, sending instant messages to specific individuals giving them instructions for accessing uncensored websites, setting up spoof trade sites, or sellers, that may take a customer's money and or send customers degraded or spoof products, to deny, disrupt, degrade, denigrate, delay, deceive, discredit, dissuade or deter, interrupting, that is, filtering, deleting, creating or modifying, communications between real customers and traders, to deny, disrupt, delay, deceive, dissuade or deter, taking over control of online websites, to deny, disrupt, discredit or delay, such as through hacking, denial of telephone and computer service, to deny, delay or disrupt, hosting targets online communications, websites for collecting site jinked, to disrupt, delay, deter or deny, contacting host websites asking them to remove material, to deny, disrupt, delay, dissuade or deter. It is unlikely that the British GHQ is the only secret service using these tactics. Other government as well as private interests can be assumed to use similar means. To deny, disrupt, degrade, denigrate, delay, deceive, discredit, dissuade or deter is exactly what internet trolls are doing in the comment sections of blogs and news sites. The more these services grow and their methods proliferate, the less possible it will become to have reasonable online discussions. This is not a staged battle between the cabal and the alliance. The two most common attacks you see these workers lob at everyone in the alternative media, not just me, is that they are making money and have a huge ego. It is sad and ironic that these skeptics are almost always getting paid more than the people they attack. They certainly display much more inflated egos. This is another classic example of projection, where terrorist billionaires are ordering scathing attacks of people bravely facing murder, while earning next to nothing for doing it. According to these same paid government trolls, there is no real resistance, the alliance is a fraud and the cabal is controlling them as well. Yet, simple logic strongly suggests this is not the case. The war is very real. There is nothing staged about it. This is a fight to the death. I understand that some people will never stop worshipping the cabal with fear, and will believe that they are staging the entire battle on both sides. If you think it through, there are many clues that disprove this hypothesis, which the paid government trolls rigorously insist is the truth. Staged battles do not involve information and disclosure. We know what fake cabal wars look like. They strictly control the information flowing out from both sides. Nothing embarrassing or revealing ever emerges. Instead, what we are seeing here is an astonishing wealth of information exposing this group and their plans, as if they are standing naked in the town square. The cabal is creating manufactured consensus on an unprecedented scale, with armies of internet trolls who are trying to confuse and demoralize you. Nothing good came out of the 2008 bailouts for the cabal. Nothing good came out of Snowden for them. A mass awakening is exactly what they don't want. This is a very dangerous situation for the cabal. Secrecy is essential to their plans. The truth is so ugly they cannot afford to have it emerge. Some very dark stuff. Look at what we already know about rape and pedophilia in Hollywood and the British government. This is only one small part of the puzzle, and it is very, very ugly. There is plenty of information waiting to emerge that is even worse. I am told a shocking number of top cabal people are members of the North American Man-Boy Love Association, or NAMBLA, as one example. This may be an accepted part of their culture, but to everyone else the news will be extremely unpleasant and horrifying. There is a whole section of financial tyranny about NAMBLA to help prepare you for this type of an announcement, if it does indeed occur. They are in a serious, escalating panic. If people find out the truth in mass numbers, the cabal knows they are done for. Insiders confirmed they have been in a serious, escalating panic for years now. In fact, a major part of their religious belief is that they must all go through a public exposure, criminal trial and potential execution. They are taught to believe that they will be resurrected after an event like this, returning as gods. Nonetheless, many of them fear such an exposure, as this idea of resurrection stretches their religious faith to the breaking point. Even if they believe it will happen, no one wants to experience mass public humiliation and a potential death sentence to get there. They will try to escape. They thought they had a few more years, based on the scenario they had expected to occur, but they now see it approaching very quickly. They are human beings, not devils, and they are completely terrified of what they will go through once this mass event starts to happen. For years now they have been begging the Alliance to give them a safe haven where they can live as a group. They have always been denied. Nonetheless, insiders tell me the vast majority of government executives in key countries are planning on taking off once the dam breaks. You will hear a lone hawk cry out as tumbleweed blows through Congress, and that's about all that will be left. These escape plans also been completely accounted for by the Alliance, and they will have nowhere to hide. Hunting Hitler, an Alliance production so you can handle the truth. High-level sources have confirmed the History Channel show Hunting Hitler is all part of the Alliance plan for full disclosure. The first episode aired on November 5th, the second on November 10th and the third on the 11th. New episodes are airing every Tuesday night. The premise of the show is that Hitler faked his death and was moved to Argentina to live out the rest of his life. Genuine, high-level military personnel are featured in the show, such as 21-year CIA veteran Bob Baer, and you can watch it for free online. I have now seen the first 2 episodes and I must admit it is stunning to see this subject being so frankly discussed on television. Hunting Hitler, S1E1. Armed with 700 pages of recently declassified FBI documents, 21-year CIA veteran Bob Baer and war crimes investigator Dr. John Sensich begin a worldwide investigation into what happened to Adolf Hitler at the end of WEI. First stop on their hunt is a small town in Argentina with mysterious Nazi ties where an FBI report places Hitler residing 3.5 months after he was believed dead. The ultimate objective of a show like this is to reveal that the Nazis did not die out after World War II as we were taught. The information in this show sets the stage for much larger and more disturbing disclosures that will follow. We will put the pieces together and realize these guys didn't just hang out and drink coconut water in the jungle. Hitler continued working to build the Fourth Reich, which infiltrated the U.S. military-industrial complex at the highest levels, as well as other nations. Once we get disclosure, shows like this will receive far more attention and publicity, effectively becoming must-see TV. Even high-level members of this group have been through unimaginable horrors. The stakes in telling the truth, for top insiders, are very high. I want to share a story about members of Congress that came from our best sources. Certain congressional aides were caught leaking information that was damaging to the cabal. Our own elected members of Congress woke up in the middle of the night to find themselves abducted by mercenaries who looked like weightlifters. Each of them were bound, gagged, beaten and thrown into the back of a van that drove fast, causing them to slide around and bang against the walls inside. They were taken to an outdoor location. A large chipper shredder machine was there, all fired up, and large enough to chew through a tree in seconds. Any of you pathetic FS think you're gonna be a effing hero? Go ahead and say one effing word. You're gonna be next in line. This is Disneyland, motherfucker, and I'm gonna give you the ride of your life. The 3 or 4 aides who ratted out the cabal were lined up and given the option of diving into the chipper shredder themselves. They refused. Each of them were shoved in headfirst. They were declared missing. No one else wanted to go to Disneyland after that. Sardonic humor is often used. Another thing you hear from insiders is that acts of torture and murder are spoken about in a sarcastic, humorous way. An example of this that has percolated into our culture is one-liners from Hollywood action movie stars. When villains threatened John Wayne, his catchphrase was "That'll be the day," which inspired the classic Buddy Holly song of the same name. The cabal threatens some people by saying they will hang you upside down and knock the earwax out of your ears. Charles Bronson and Clint Eastwood both made sarcastic, tough guy jokes in the middle of life and death scenarios that would terrify most people. Clint Eastwood's all-time classic, of course, is "Go Ahead. Make My Day." By far, the greatest amount of these sorts of jokes appeared in classic Arnold Schwarzenegger movies like Commando. Please don't disturb my friend. He is dead tired. In the real world, cabal members who anger the group will be threatened with lines like this: "Can you hear what I'm saying? Or would you prefer to have these fine gentlemen hang you upside down and knock the earwax out of your ears?" There is an ongoing competition to see who can come up with the wittiest, most creative one-liners about all sorts of things. It is admittedly frustrating. I am leaking these details to you now so you understand that these people are not happy. If you've seen some of the classic mafia movies and TV shows, you have caught a glimpse of how awful life can be for cabal members. No one is free from the risk of betrayal. No one is safe. Everyone is a potential target at all times. Worst of all, they are told that everyone else in the world is even worse. This is nothing compared to what they would do if they got a hold of you. We don't need any more atrocities. What we do need is to finally break out of this abusive relationship where we suffer domestic violence, on a global level. It has been upsetting to long-term readers of this site, and to me, that we are hearing all of this talk of mass arrests and nothing has happened yet. However, the evidence that there is an alliance, and they are building up to something like this, is becoming ever increasingly obvious. Let's be clear on this. I have had many dreams telling me one of my roles is to encourage people not to have a genocidal mindset once the truth comes out. Many of the people in these groups are deeply wounded and would love to be free if there was any possible way for them to do it. We do not want to act like the most violent members of their society just because we get proof that they really exist. The initial knee-jerk reaction will be to want them to suffer as much pain and torture as possible. Granted, if someone has committed crimes, they need to be accountable for what they have done. This needs to happen with due process, not a kangaroo court where masses of perpetrators receive quick judgment and firing squad executions. People with provable criminal records can also become heroes, such as by producing testimony that helps solve the problem. Why wouldn't there be an alliance? Also ask yourself this, why wouldn't there be an alliance? What if you had direct, first-hand knowledge that dozens of your closest friends had been knocked off in ways like I just described? Why wouldn't the majority of the world want to rise up against a violent, sadistic cabal seeking to kill us off in mass numbers? Why wouldn't the majority of the world want to rise up against a violent, sadistic cabal seeking to kill us off by the hundreds of millions? Why wouldn't a majority of the Pentagon be pissed off about their own lives being used as pawns on a global chessboard for billionaire bankers? Far too many people in the alliance have already died in their fight to restore peace and freedom on Earth. This battle is extremely serious for them. High-level banking executives are being knocked off left and right because the cabal cannot afford to have another Snowden. The war is real, and for those on the front lines, the stakes are life and death. There have been many other wars like this throughout our history. It is cyclical. The people who stand up and fight the villains are honored as heroes. All the evidence suggests ISIS is being used to advance the cabal's plans, so again, When ISIS apparently took credit for the Paris attacks, they did it all wrong, as if someone else wrote it up and blamed it on ISIS. The attacks showed a level of planning and logistics that was far greater than the typical lone suicide bomber missions, many of which have failed miserably. Similarly, the Russian airliner clearly seems to have been downed by a missile that is beyond any capability that ISIS now has. All of this points towards a greater military force that is creating terrorism for its own political reasons, and blaming it on a proxy. So ask yourself this: why would the Western elite want to punish Russia and France? What if both Russia and France are taking bold steps to defeat the cabal? What if these can be demonstrated with provable evidence from the media? In order to understand what is going on, it is necessary to reveal what the alliance is, based on an easily audited trail of public domain information. Revealing the alliance. As we head into part 2, we will explore the fascinating story of the alliance that is working to defeat the crumbling cabal. All of the cabal's plans to create death on a massive scale are being very successfully blocked. All they are left with is terrorist attacks against smaller groups of people. I am sure it hurts the alliance every time one of these attacks succeeds. They have been working very hard to thwart each and every attempt of this nature. The alliance includes a majority of the CIA and the Pentagon, as well as Russia, China, Germany, the elected UK government and France, among many others. A very active war is being fought over the control of the world's financial system, and whether or not we ever get disclosure in the technology that comes with it. Part 2 coming soon.